Comic Clan, and welcome to Comics in the Cross, the greatest streamers you have never heard of. I, of course, am one of your hosts, Cross, and I am not joined by Nitro this week. Nitro is taking a little bit of a break, so I have brought in a very good worthy replacement, I believe, for this week's topic. First time as a guest on the show, long overdue getting him on here, is Jarrett, the Infinity Bear himself from the Infinity Bros, is joining me today.
Hi guys, I guess I'm the pinch hitter. I'm trying to take Nitro's shoes, and I'm not sure if they fit yet, but we'll see.
We'll see how you do. We're off to a good start already, you know.
Right.
Off to a good start. But thank you for joining us. Honestly, I've been chatting to Jarrett pretty much since I started talking to Infinity Bros. I don't know how many years ago at this point, and this has been long overdue trying to get you on the podcast at some point. And when we came to talk about Moon Knight, I'm like, okay, like Jarrett is like the Moon Knight guy. I have to get him on the show to talk about Moon Knight. It's like, if I want to get an in-depth and compare it to the comics and all the stuff we usually do, I don't know about the Moon Knight stuff. I need to get him on. This is when I need to get him in. And apparently everyone thought the same thing, because everybody's been trying to get him on the show. Jarrett's like Little's like knowledge of the Moon Knight verse in Marvel has became this like sought after thing now.
I'm the hot commodity. I should start charging like cups of coffee for each time I visit. Someone's got to send me a pack of coffee.
Hey, that's a cheap plug there for your new sponsor at the Infinity Bros. Now that you guys have got a coffee sponsorship,
we do. We have Many Worlds Tavern, which is fantastic, and I've been drinking their coffee for too long. So if I get jittery, that's why. It's because I don't eat. I just drink coffee.
I think that's called being a dad, man. I think that's just part and parcel of it. But for anyone here, I think most of our audience knows you at this point. It's like we've spoken about the Infinity Bros plenty of times on the show. We've had you guys on as a variety of guests and playing games with us and doing different things. But just in case anyone doesn't know who the Infinity Bros are, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jarrett, and a little bit about the Bros.
Yeah, so I am one of 6, and we do a podcast mainly talking about the same things you guys do, which is all things geeky and nerdy. Specific focus on like the superhero genre, so we cover everything from Marvel and DC. We tend not to go as much into like indie comics, although me and Robbie are big fans of both of those. And then we try to stream every day, although in practice that's not always realistic. But if you check us out on a random weekday, we're probably streaming. The weekends tend to be hit or miss. But yeah, we're kind of 6 guys who do a little bit of everything. It's hard to find like an area of like geek culture that one of us doesn't cover, and I just happen to be the Moon Knight guy on the podcast. So,
well, I was going to say that like with 6 of you, you'd like to think that pretty much most of the geek culture is covered in some shape or form, because you're here as a Moon Knight guy, but you're a comic book guy. You're also like something that we're delving a lot into, starting to explore the indie world of comics. You're a big indie comic guy. Like, there's a bunch of comics I've talked about that we're planning to do in the show where you've like been big on saying, oh, that's a great one. Yeah, definitely check that out. You're also like a tabletop gamer guy. You're a card gamer guy with like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon cards, all this different stuff. Like, you cover so much stuff just within yourself. You're a pretty like well-rounded in the geek culture yourself, man.
I'm gonna put that on a name tag, and then like if my wife ever asks me like, you know, what are you doing this weekend, I'll be like, all of this stuff.
But yeah, it's like, so if you ever want to pick like someone's mind about all this other stuff of geeky stuff, because Jarrett is like literally a bit of everything, you know, a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to geek culture. He is one of your guys for it. Got a lot of guys in chat kind of saying that as well. They've tried to pick your brains on Moon Knight. Good morning, guys. Yes, I did get a haircut. Thank you for noticing, Mark.
Looking stylish, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's like getting you on for the Moon Knight thing, though. This is something that's well without our wheelhouse, and there's a lot to talk about and take apart in this show and delve into. So I'm glad we could finally get you on, because I think the only other bro we've actually managed to get on the podcast has been Isaac.
Right.
And
Isaac think goes everywhere. He's like our ambassador to the Infinity Bros, because he goes everywhere and then he invites everybody on ours.
Yeah, like I still say that like one of these days my goal is to try and get all the Infinity Bros gathered together on the podcast. I know it's probably never going to happen. Like
we call that there is a joke. Isaac has actually talked about this before. If anyone manages to get all 6 bros, because each one of us, there's 6 of us and 6 Infinity Stones, like that would be the first podcast to get a real Infinity Snap, to have all 6 bros on.
See, that's my plan.
You might be the first.
See, that's my plan, is to do that. Like, I've literally claimed that I want to be the Gauntlet. I legitimately want to be the Gauntlet that can gather all 6 bros together in one place. Because, like, even in your own show, it like never happens.
No, absolutely.
Pretty much. It's like like getting a show with all 6 of you. I think there's been like, not including like big specials that you've done, like there's been like 1 or 2 maybe, I think I've heard, where it's like all of you have been on.
For actual like podcast episodes, I think there's one, and I think it was like our first or second episode, and my computer like broke in the middle. This was when I had my old PC.
Of course.
And so it's the only episode with all 6 of us, but I have no audio in the episode, so it's technically 5.
So you're there,
so
you still have
all 6.
You still have any input at all.
No. And it's awkward too. So this was before Max started getting better at editing. And so you have to go back and listen. There are moments in the podcast where it's just like dead air and everybody going, mm-hmm. It is so awkward. We got better since then, but yeah, it was rough in the beginning.
But let me do a little shout out for that as well, just as Jarrett's saying to go and check it out for yourself. There you go. There's a whole host of links.
I would not recommend starting from the beginning. Just catch up on whatever the newest episode is and go forward.
Okay, that link has not worked because all the things of like, hey, go and check this out is now like added onto the end of the previous link. So,
oh wow.
So I don't know why that's happened. So copy and paste it and take out like whatever stuff is not meant to be in there. Like that went horribly wrong for links. I tried to put that together before the show. It obviously has not worked. But yeah, you can check out the you can check out the Infinity Bros wherever you go, wherever you get your good podcast from. You can check them out. They've got their website. Check them out on all social media, pretty much. You can find these guys. They've got amazing takes on it, so please go and check all that out. Hey, Humor coming in. Is Infinity Bear? I see it absolutely is. Got to put spaces. I thought I did put the spaces, and apparently not. But
it looks like I can click on it. Oh no, never mind. It does. It tags the.
Yeah, because see, like there, it's like it's got the link with the .com Infinity Bros, and then it's like got the next thing, and it's like I thought I put spaces, but apparently not.
That's wild. But, space breaks are moved by chat. That's wild.
Yeah, so
that's alright. It looks cool though.
So yeah, so the links are there. Go out at the very least. Hey, Locke, you do a shout out for the Infinity Bros as well. Go and check out their Twitch. All the links are over on their Twitch page as well. So go and give that a spam as well. But yeah, I'm excited to get talking because like we literally have to stop ourselves, like, which I said to you is a natural thing for me and Nitro almost on a weekly basis. We were about to start getting into stuff like before we went on air, like about Moon Knight. It's like, no, shut up, stop. We need to stop doing it. We need to wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nope.
That's our problem too. Is we do this.
Hold on a second. I'm getting some music there. Apparently that shout out for Cameron plus Deanna do not have any clips in our channel, and for some reason the shout out thing we've got decides, hey, I'm going to play music over that. Don't know why it's a thing it does, but it does. But yeah, so before we delve into Moon Knight, because that's their big talking point for today, there's another Marvel property that everyone's been talking about this week. Right. It's kind of taken a bit of the the mainstream headlines and grabbing everyone's attention, creating all sorts of conversations, and that is of course Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So we are not going to go into any spoilers about that. This is just going to be a quick little thing, and it kind of ties into some of the stuff we want to talk about with Moon Knight. But what did you think of Doctor Strange? What did you think of the movie? And
it's hard to this one particularly is hard to talk about without spoilers, but I don't want to be another person who's dropping spoilers right now because my poor sister keeps texting me. She hasn't seen the movie yet, and I think she already knows the full plot. But
yeah, because it's been it's been out for a week, and it's almost impossible not to see spoilers for everything.
We had there was this collective agreement on the internet that people would at least attempt to try to warn people that there were spoilers either on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, and that lasted all of a day. Yeah, and then you can't go anywhere now without people talking about it. And so yeah, if you haven't seen it, just stay off the internet until you get a chance to.
Yeah, pretty much. It's almost impossible to no spoilers at this point. And if we do spoil anything, I apologize. But it's everything's out there. Chances are you probably know the main spoilers for it.
Right. So I will say this just right off the bat, this is not a movie to bring your kids to. The theater that I was in was packed full of kids, and one of the parents walked out really angry, and I was surprised that they stayed through the whole movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is not, guys. If you're a Marvel fan and you go watch these with your kids, I would say probably 12 and 13 and under, do not like. This is one that's okay to skip.
Yeah, like
As far as
just remember
sorry,
this is a Sam Raimi movie, so just remember, think it's not in terms of Spider-Man, it's closer to Evil Dead on a lot of the stuff. Like, it's stuff that you need to be a little bit more mature to see. Some of this is not a kid's thing in the least.
So the comparison that I made to a lot of people is, I don't feel like this isn't a Marvel movie that is Sam Raimi flavored. I think this is a Sam Raimi movie that is Marvel flavored. Like,
that is a really good description, yeah.
And for what it was, I liked some of the horror aspects in it. I thought it was really creepy, and it did that very well. This is a very, like, again, adult sort of Marvel movie. But ultimately, like, this one didn't stick the landing for me. I think it had a lot of writing issues. Some of the dialogue was just horrible. I've seen mixed opinions on, like, the CGI and stuff. I didn't think it landed very well. I thought it looked a little rough, but I know a lot of people actually really enjoyed it, so to each his own. I will say this. Wasn't my cup of tea, wasn't my favorite Marvel movie, but if you enjoy it, that's totally valid. It didn't do it for me. I think they failed to deliver on some of the promises that we were excited for, and gave us some really, really weird stuff that we did not need or want.
Yeah, I would kind of agree to a certain extent with that. Like, I enjoyed it for what it was. Like, I can't come out of it and say it was a bad movie.
Right.
Like, I enjoyed it, but it's definitely, like, I think within the Phase 4 movies, I think when I did my gradings for it, like, it's literally in the middle. It's literally in between everything, and I'm like, there's some really good stuff in this movie. I thoroughly enjoyed some of it and thought certain stuff was done really well. Definitely the moments, like, there are definitely horror elements in this, and in those moments you can see Raimi at some of his best. Like, some of it is so cool. Like, this isn't really a spoiler because it is in the trailers, but when you see, like, Zombie Strange, and the stuff that appears round about that scene and stuff like that, it's like those are definitely Sam Raimi, like, doing some really cool stuff in those moments. It's done really well. There's other stuff where it's like it did not deliver, and I saw it before Nitro did, and I was saying it in beforehand. Like, one of the big things going into this is we thought this was going to be the answer to all the multiversal stuff that's been getting set up previously, because we saw setups for that in WandaVision and Loki and Spider-Man, and we thought this is going to be the culmination of that. And it's like, you have to almost let go of that and remember and just think of it as like, this is a Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah.
Take the
the
full Marvel expanse down to just Strange.
Yeah.
And I think that helps a little if you view it in that aspect, but even then it still didn't fully deliver for me.
Yeah.
You know?
I think people were expecting this to be sort of like what Civil War was for. It was a Captain America movie. Oh, sorry. It was a Captain America movie, but it brought in so much more than just a Captain America movie. And I think that's what we thought that this was going to be. And this is like a Doctor Strange movie. Like, flat out.
Yeah, it's definitely a Doctor Strange movie. They definitely give time to him. There's a lot of storyline elements that go towards Wanda as well, who obviously is in the movie. And those are definitely the two of the major focuses in this. So the movie really focuses around those two and the journeys that they are on. It really doesn't go out beyond that. Which isn't a bad thing. You know, I think it's okay to have stories that are small scale. Again, like, we're going to talk about that in Moon Knight today. Like, with Moon Knight, like, Moon Knight's very much like it is a story around Moon Knight and his world and what's happening. And it's like, that's okay. You know, the big thing now that's an issue is with Marvel, it's very easy once you do something like Endgame that everything is all encompassing.
Right.
And, like, it's okay to not do that and just do a simple thing again, which they could have done, but even then I think there was a lot of stuff that was missed. I don't want to go deeper than that, just because we could easily, like, go into spoilers and stuff. I see Chat's already
spoiled.
Chat doesn't care. Chat, I'm not going to say it out. You know, I don't want to say it out loud, but Chat's already kind of just going into some of the spoiler stuff for that. It's like, you know, he was done dirty, but like, it was a pretty cool scene. I'm just going to say, like, seeing it happen was well done, but yeah, he was done dirty. I will agree. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about that on the show in a couple of weeks. You can actually go over to the Infinity Bros and check out their podcast. They've talked about Doctor Strange in their spoiler cast already for that. So if you want to get some full thoughts from Jarrett and the guys, go over there.
It was so just to heads up, it is just me and Max. Like, it is full spoilers, and it is me and Max complaining for an hour. I Since then I've talked to the rest of the bros, and I would say if you want an opinion that's not me or Max's, because me and Max were maybe harder on the movie than we should have been. Make sure to talk to Isaac on his stream as well. He has a very different perspective than I do, and I was actually really enjoyed his perspective on it. So check out the episode if you would like, but also go talk to Isaac and Mark about their thoughts on this, because they had some really good ones, I think.
Yeah, Locke's bringing up an interesting point in chat as well. They're like, I desperately want to know what was cut, reshot due to
right,
due to like the times and stuff getting changed for it.
I think COVID affected this. I think the director swap affected this, and I think sort of our expectations of like what Phase 4 was going to give us affected this quite a bit. And I think all those things accumulated into a delivery that felt maybe not up to par for a lot of Marvel fans. That being said, like, if you enjoy this movie, enjoy this movie. Like, take it for what it is.
Well, that's it. If it's something that you're definitely getting something out of, that is perfectly fine. If this is one of the best movies you've seen, it's like, that's okay. You're allowed to enjoy that stuff, you know. You're allowed to take that on board and enjoy it. Like, if you thought this was a great movie, enjoy it. It's like, but yeah, each their own opinions on it, and I just think it didn't hold up. Even if you do take it down to just a simple, like, this is a contained thing to just this character, like,
right.
All you need to do is look within Phase 4 to something like Shang-Chi, and it's like which was a pretty much self-contained thing. It's like it was done so much better, you know.
Oh my gosh, I love Shang-Chi.
That's a really good movie that people stopped talking about way too quickly, in my opinion. It was so good.
That's one of those that, like, we tend to talk about, like, our immediate reactions, and as the Infinity Bros, we don't really revisit some of the stuff that we talked about. But Shang-Chi is one of those that continues to be good long after I watch it, and not many things can stick that landing like the 5th or 6th watch.
Yeah.
So yeah, I loved it.
Oh yeah, like I could quite happily sit and watch that again, and I know I'm going to be in for a good time, and it's going to hold up.
Yeah.
But that does bring up an interesting point, though, as we're talking about Doctor Strange and the way that Marvel's gone with Phase 4. And it kind of ties into Moon Knight a little as well. We were talking a little bit before stream about it, of online, a lot of people are now talking about how Marvel Phase 4 basically doesn't seem to have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming very clear and apparent to a lot of people that they don't have a plan. Like, whereas, like, you know, like, earlier Marvel, they obviously didn't have a plan when the MCU first started, at least not a vast one, but very quickly they got a plan in place and started working towards an end goal and started building towards the Infinity Stones and the Infinity Gauntlet and fighting Thanos and setting all of that up.
Right.
But it feels like after Endgame, and then possibly with the whole COVID thing as well, but again, that could, for me, that's only so much of an excuse.
Yeah.
Because we're now like, what, 2 years or second year of like movie and TV show releases, and it's like, I can start to see what people are saying, like, it doesn't feel like a plan. Like, Doctor Strange doesn't feel like it ties in as much as it should have.
Yeah, it's almost like they're flying the plane with one engine, and like, it. People were worried that Endgame was sort of them jumping the shark, and I think to some degree, if they don't fix the track that they're on right now, it sort of feels like that. Like, everything is just downhill. I don't fully agree with that, just because, like, I think Loki delivered above expectation. I think Shang-Chi delivered above expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still gems in this. But as far as, like, the direction of the overall MCU, it feels like they have so many different options, and they're trying to pull too many things at once. And we talked about this beforehand, but, like,
you know,
yeah, it's lacking.
But that's it, though. It's like, it feels like there's a lot of stuff they're setting up, because obviously with Loki they set up Kang, and then Kang the Conqueror's going to be appearing in Ant-Man and Wasp. That's already been revealed and stuff like that. So it felt very much like we're setting up for a multiversal appearance of Kang, and this whole new world of Kang as the big bad, and going into time travel and multiverses and all that stuff, which Kang's a big villain for the Avengers, so it made sense to go to someone like that if you're trying to go above and beyond Thanos. Like, there's only so many you can do. You can use to top him, and Kang is an option they could definitely go. But then, of course, another big one a lot of people were talking about was stuff like Secret Invasion. Mm-hmm. And then they announced a Disney Plus show for that, and especially with the way a lot of the Disney Plus shows are going, it's kind of, the Disney Plus shows, it's almost like for a lot of them, you're kind of like, does this tie into the MCU? And like, you know how like when you like, used to watch like the Marvel Netflix shows,
right?
And we're like, okay, they're part of the MCU. Maybe? No, not really. No, kind of not anymore. And it's like it feels like that because it feels like WandaVision was, because Wanda comes back and she mentions Westport, whatever it was. I've lost the name of the place she was. But it's like she mentions where she was, what happened in WandaVision and stuff like that during the movie. Like, okay, so that ties in. They've announced there's going to be a new Captain America movie with Sam Wilson Falcon now as the new Captain America and stuff. So, okay, that ties in. Low-key, does it tie in?
Not yet.
Not really. It's kind of, it's just doing its own thing. And it's like, okay, Hawkeye. Okay, that must tie in. He's an Avenger. It must tie in. No, not really. Is it even getting a sequel? No. They're not doing a second season. Okay, Moon Knight, that's a new one, that's a big one, everyone's hyping this up. Does it tie in? No, not really. And I'm like, is it getting a second season? Well, they set up for it, but nothing's been announced, and Oscar Isaac was technically only signed for one season.
Right.
And it's like, is he coming back? It's like,
having Oscar Isaac up in the air is a big, like...
How did you not get him down? How did you not lock him in for more seasons? How did you not lock him in for Midnight Suns? How did you not lock him in for movie appearances? And all this stuff, you're setting up stuff like, you're doing crap like Eternals and setting up Black Knight via that, and like setting up a Blade movie, and they're like, hey, we could tie Moon Knight into all of that. No, we're just not going to lock him in for any of that. And I'm like, how stupid are you? Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Like, that has potential to be this amazing horror, darker sort of, like, you know, movie or show or something. And it's like, nah, we're just not going to do that.
And I get Oscar Isaac's into this, especially having been burnt by Disney before.
Yeah.
And all the mess that he had to deal with Fox and you know, being Apocalypse for the X-Men. And so I get why he's gun shy. But if you're Disney and you line up something like Moon Knight, why do you stop there? Like negotiate, do what you got to do to get him locked in, because right now they're missing so much on the back end, like what Phase 4 is.
Yeah.
That if you don't have the promise of something to come, like Moon Knight in the MCU officially, what are you doing here? I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Good morning, guys. Saying this is an actor thing that they can't do like multi-movie contracts anymore, like Marvel and stuff. And I'm like, which is fair enough, but even then though, it's like, you think there'd be some sort of like gentleman's agreement sort of thing, like handshake on it, of especially like if you're bringing somebody in, like, this is the plan, this is where we're planning to go, and like, and it's not like you can't pitch it with like, hey, look what we did with the MCU so far. And like you said, I understand why Oscar Isaac's so gun shy with stuff, because, you know, like playing Apocalypse before with the Fox stuff, and it like this horrendously awful movie which he was not able to shine at his best in, mixed with the fact of like the bad reception for it and all this stuff, then mixed with as well, like, you know, being part of the Star Wars franchise and the sequels, where it's basically, you know, the more the years go on, the more hated it feels like those movies become. And like, in being part of that, hey, do you want to be part of this series that's, you know, kind of similar to these things you've done before? I'm like, maybe not.
Yeah, and a hero that he probably likely doesn't recognize, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
most people didn't know who Moon Knight was before this was announced. Even a lot of like diehard fans are like, I think he was a West Coast Avengers once. Like, so I understand his trepidation, but gosh, we need him in the MCU.
Yeah, we need stuff like this, and I think that's the thing. That's where the MCU really seems to focus. What it's doing best right now, for me personally, is when they're doing something that's different. Like, it feels like we've seen all the big superhero actiony stuff, and it's like, you know, a lot of people, like, even this show hated the fact of like, oh, we don't see the Moon Knight suit enough. And like, for me personally, for most of this though, I was kind of enthralled in the story. I enjoyed that it was something different, and and by the end of it, I felt like I was connecting with Mark and Steven and feeling like I was on their journey. And like, they can do so much with stuff like this, and I feel like they just don't have a plan for it. Like, same as before, like with Hawkeye, like, are we going to see Kate Bishop back? No idea. We brought Kingpin in for Hawkeye, and it's like, yeah, but is he going to be Kingpin of the season? And I'm like, you know, of the MCU?
More Daredevil, or we get like
everyone wants to see it. Like, I've wanted to say that since I seen Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, I want to see him face Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and I'm like, are we going to see it? Possibly not. Like, you know, like Charlie Cox appeared as, you know, Matt Murdock in No Way Home, and like, is he going to come back? No idea. It feels like all this stuff has been put out there, and there's no. Would you have trained us for like over 10 years that when you do stuff like this, we're going to pay it off somehow?
Yeah.
To now throwing stuff where it's like we don't even know what the next big thing we're setting up to is. Like, you know, spoilers for Doctor Strange, they do stuff that hints at Secret Wars, which is like phenomenal. That was an amazing event, probably one of the last good things that Marvel has done in about the last 20 years that people actually cared about, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, this could actually be really cool, and it was, until they like undid it, but that's a whole other talk in the comics. But you know what I mean? There's like, okay, we're heading towards that, but like, I thought we were doing Kang in this multiverse thing. Oh, but we're doing Secret Invasion over there on Disney, so is that not going to tie into it? Like, it feels like we're just like kind of giving flashes of stuff, and like, well, if all of these go to pay off, then how are you going to pay all of that off without screwing it up? Or if you do one of them and we get a payoff for one of them and you do it well, it's like, well, why did you even bother teasing these other things? Because now the world's different following that event, so how can you possibly do what you were going to do?
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it feels like they're clutching at straws, and it's a weird place to find Marvel. Following,
I agree. And like, this is the studio that has, like, you know, we talk about it with Warner Brothers, we talk about it with Fox, we talk about it with everybody, how like, if you want a template of good world building and good connected universes and having a plan, it's always been Kevin Feige in the MCU.
Absolutely.
This was the issue with Star Wars, this is the issue with DC.
Yeah.
And to see them floundering like this is like, what is doing? Like, what is going on here?
Well, yeah, Feige's always been the man with a plan, and I mean, Nitro's been screaming it from the rooftops for years now, that like the DCEU and what they're doing with the DC movies is like, they desperately need a Feige. They need someone in charge of that that's got a plan for the next 5-10 years, that knows what's going to be happening, how it all fits together. But now we're almost at a place where like the MCU needs a Feige.
Yeah.
The problem is they've got one, like, but why is it not fitting together? And I'm like I now that they're having a talk about everything and planning stuff out, I've got high hopes for it, but I'm like, you also might have injured yourself slightly though with not planning out this stuff. Yeah. You know, this has got the potential to be really bad if it's not, like, if you don't catch up with it properly. You know,
and
like,
people are starting to lose interest. Like, you know, my family, like my parents and my sisters and my extended family, you know, they caught the major Marvel releases, hit or miss over time, but like, none of them are watching these TV shows. I think everybody watched WandaVision because everybody was stuck home for the, you know, couple
everyone was stuck home, and we hadn't had a Marvel thing for about a year. So everyone was like, hey, this is the first Marvel thing, like, let's watch it. And like, but I remember talking to people, and people like watched the first 2 episodes and were like, we're not like invested enough in that first 2 episode drop to like, oh, why should I watch more? This is really weird. And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I loved WandaVision. There was a great payoff for it. I felt like they built a great world around it. But at the same time, it's like, for your average fans, I'm like, you're really playing with stuff. And Locke's got an interesting point there as well, saying like, in fairness, we may not see how they fit together yet, which is a definite thing, but, you know, and it is early in the phase for that. The problem is, like, it doesn't feel like there's a plan for it, and I feel like after a 10-year plus run, when you knew Endgame was your big payoff and you were planning to capitalize on that, somebody should have had a plan.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? There's like, because it's like, oh, it's a brand new phase, and it's the almost like a second era of Marvel, because if you say like the Infinity era is the first one, and like this is like what the multiversal era or whatever, if you want to call it that. It's like, the problem is, like, we didn't have a plan when the MCU started. It's like, well, that's because everyone expected Iron Man to fail. It was a Hail Mary pass when that came out. They had nothing left and put all their eggs in one basket, and it just so happened it paid off.
Right.
We're like 11 years, 12 years deep in Phase 4 at this point, and I'm like, there's no excuse to not have a plan when this is your job.
Yeah.
It's the biggest movie franchise in the world, arguably in history, because nobody has ever done what Marvel has done.
Right.
A 20 plus movie franchise that is all connected, that is not rebooted, that is not changed, that is just, this is the world, and it all fits together. And to not have a plan for when you got to Endgame, because like it's not like you didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
That's my that's my problem with it, is like we might not see how it fits together, but when he makes an announcement like, oh, we're going to do a thing to plan the next 10 years, and I'm like, shouldn't that have been happening? Like, shouldn't that have happened? Like, okay, I get COVID, put stuff off, but as soon as COVID was done, Zoom call that crap. You know what I mean? It's like, shouldn't that have been happening in 2020?
Yeah.
Especially when the releases were all pushed off. Like, it makes me worried that like there's not been a plan, and it's like
they should have had this conversation 2 years before Endgame released.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just had it like, what is the... Because people knew that they were coming out of Endgame. Our hype level was through the roof. And you introduce something new in the Disney Plus series and all this. And so why don't you keep rolling with that? Like, keep the momentum. And it feels like right now we're sort of coasting on whatever the fumes from Endgame were. And as diehard Marvel fans, like, we're going to go watch everything. But you lost the casual people along the way who enjoyed what Endgame was. You know, people did not really watch Hawkeye. People did not really watch Moon Knight, who weren't, like, invested in these series. And so I'm with you, Cross. It just feels out of place.
Because that's the thing. It feels like you should have had something in place as a hook for people.
Right.
Because, like, you killed off Black Widow, you killed off Iron Man, Captain America went and had his happy ending and was back with Peggy.
Right.
All these main characters who people had invested in, and I always said that, like, Infinity War, like, why they, you know, the newer heroes were the ones that disappeared was because it was the last hurrah for the original Avengers. It was their, you know, it was their swan song. So it made sense. It made perfect sense for that. But the thing is, that's who people have invested the last 10 years of their life in, so you've got to give them a reason to come back now.
Yeah.
And some of those absolutely were. Like Spider-Man No Way Home. Phenomenal movie. I want to see another Spider-Man movie now. I want to see where it continues on. Shang-Chi. I want to see the next Shang-Chi movie. I'm desperate to see what they do with that character now. You know, and it's like, but some of them I'm like, I don't care as much. And this is like what I do. I talk comics, I talk superhero movies, you know, and it's like, and I get it, Loxian saying it's like, it's not fair. They definitely changed plans to the first 3 phases. Like, I definitely feel like it just, I've never felt like Marvel was kind of lost with this, because like Moon Knight ended on a cliffhanger essentially, where it's like we were setting stuff up where it was clearly setting up for a sequel, but Oscar Isaac isn't locked in for a sequel. They didn't announce that there's a second season coming. There's no, like, at the end of every property Marvel done that, like such and such will return. At the end of Loki, we got Loki's coming back for a season 2, you know, Loki will return. And you know, some stuff didn't get a sequel season. Well, it makes sense, because like, why do another Captain America Winter Soldier season when we're doing Captain America 4? Why do WandaVision when she's showing up in Doctor Strange? And you know, some stuff, it doesn't make sense. But other stuff, it's like, well, why aren't we getting a Hawkeye season 2?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Don't get me wrong, they kind of screwed the pooch on that finale for that. That ruined like a perfect season for me. Like, I loved Hawkeye. I thought it was a really good show.
Yeah.
Until that finale, and it really dropped it for me.
And we talked about that quite a bit, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, because I'm hyped for Echo, but if you watched Hawkeye, it's hard for people to get hyped for Echo, because they really didn't do much with her, and I feel like that one didn't stick the landing. And so, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm hyped for Echo for a lot of different reasons other than how the series paid off, but I'm feeling exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
Finale of Hawkeye was meant to set up Echo. I agree. I don't think it did a good enough job of that.
Yeah. And look, just to kind of catch your point there, saying that's like, you know, to the degree that part of the problem is they threw out their A-list, and I'm like, but that's the thing though.
Yeah.
Marvel didn't have their A-list when they made the movies. Like, Iron Man was what they started with. Iron Man is one of their top heroes now. He's one of the top heroes in the world. Everyone knows who Iron Man is. If he was a D-lister before 2008, I would be generous. Nobody gave a toss about Iron Man, comics or otherwise. Captain America, everyone knew him. He's pop culture.
Right.
The Captain America comics are still a comic I do not pick up and have no interest in, and unfortunately a lot of people feel the same. You know, it's like Thor was a guy that spoke like he was out of a Shakespearean play.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these were not characters that were selling comics. That's why Marvel still owned them.
Yeah.
And then even if you want to talk like that, like, they didn't have their A-listers, but they made them A-listers. Even if you want to talk about other characters, Ant-Man, who gives a toss about Ant-Man? They made an amazing comedy series out of Ant-Man. Guardians of the Galaxy was one of their most successful movies when it dropped in 2014. See, if you would have told me that, looking at the comic history of Guardians of the Galaxy, no one would have believed you.
Absolutely not.
So the fact of like them setting up stuff that's to come, like, who's Shang-Chi? Shang-Chi is a martial artist in the Marvel universe that nobody cares about and nobody reads.
Every single person I talked to before that movie came out, they're like, I know Shang-Chi from Spider Island, Avengers versus X-Men, and that's about it. You know what I mean? Like,
couple of crossover stuff where he showed up. You've probably
Right.
seen him if you happen to be an avid Iron Fist reader,
Right.
because he showed up a few times in crossover with Iron Fist, but like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that's my thing, is like, if you're going to then come into a new world where you've gotten those A-listers gone, there is no reason that Marvel could not set up to try and create more big names.
A-listers. Yeah.
More new A-listers, more people to invest in. That's
the thing. So an interesting point to that is, like, I've been a Moon Knight fan my whole life. Never in a million years would I be like, this guy's gonna be a household name. People are gonna have T-shirts of him. My mom's gonna know who Moon Knight is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of there. My kids, so I wore this shirt to work, and my kids knew who Khonshu and Moon Knight were.
Which, can I just
And
say,
was
by the
like,
way, that is a phenomenal shirt. I love that shirt so much. It is so cool.
But, you know, Marvel is doing this where they're taking these, you know, comic book names and making them household names. They're not doing as well of a job currently, but, like, they have the ability to do that. We've seen that. Iron Man, again, was like, you know, he was sort of big in the comics, but not really. Ant-Man, they went through like 4 different Ant-Men. I think the one that was current Ant-Man at the time that dropped was the Irredeemable Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Which, like, screw that completely. But they really delivered on that, and so we want to just see that going forward, where they deliver these, you know, create A-listers out of people we don't know, and they did that with Shang-Chi. But I don't know. You're hitting a lot of things here, Cross, that I agree with.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I say all this stuff just as an assessment now from where we are, like, to some of the points that are coming up in chat and stuff. I will hold my hands up, and I am quite happy to be proven wrong on everything.
I hope we eat our words.
In
Absolutely.
fact, I hopefully am. I hope I am wrong. I hope there is a set plan for this stuff. I hope they know where they're going with a lot of this stuff, and I hope it's not just been throwing stuff at the wall.
Yeah.
The thing is, only time will tell. So I'm quite happy to watch Phase 4, 5 and 6. I'm going to watch them anyway. I'm a diehard comic fan. I'm a diehard Marvel fan. I will go and watch this stuff. Even the most awful stuff I will watch. Hell, I tried to make it through as much of the Inhumans TV show as I could. That's how much of a Marvel fan I am.
Oh, buddy, that's rough.
Like, I didn't finish it, don't get me wrong. I didn't finish the show. I'm like, got to like episode 4 and I'm like, why the hell am I watching this show about superpowered people without superpowers running about Hawaii? There's nothing happening. No, I'm done.
That seems awful. Goodness.
It really was. Like, you want to see, I will never complain about how awful a Marvel property is.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm reminded of the Inhuman show, and I'm like, yep, that's the bottom of the barrel.
That exists. Yeah.
It really is. And that was an official MCU property. That was going to be a movie at one point.
I know.
It's like, yeah, we dodged a bullet in that one. But anyway, so that's kind of our short chat for Phase 4 a little bit. So I want to now transition, properly delving into Moon Knight, properly delving into the show. Don't mention that, Cross, it still hurts from ads there. Yeah, trust me, it hurts me as well.
You get
it. I saw a shirt yesterday, Snoopy and Moon Knight in Woodstock, Wisconsin. That's cool.
I love that.
That's awesome. I love the fact that all this Moon Knight stuff is now appearing with all this crossover stuff. It's so cool. So this is going into full spoilers for Moon Knight. This is what you're all probably here for, but just in case someone has wandered in, we are going to spoil the show. We are going to spoil what happened in the whole 6 episodes. If you have not seen it, go and watch it. It's all on Disney Plus. Go check it all out and come back and catch this. This will be up on YouTube and up wherever you get podcasts from during this week. So come back and finish it out later. Absolutely. But we are going to go into full spoilers for Moon Knight, so you are warned. So as the resident Moon Knight fan, and Moon Knight from the comics, what is your take on the series now that it's finished? The 6 episodes are done. What did you think of it? What did you think of the direction it went, and how does it compare to what Moon Knight's like in the comics? Is it similar? Is it different? And if there's a difference, is that a good or a bad thing? Because not all changes are necessarily bad.
Yeah, so this one was interesting. I wrestled with this one quite a bit. In fact, the whole series, I love the series, but there was a bit in the middle where it sort of like, I wasn't sure how I was landing on it. Ultimately, I think it sort of stuck the landing. We'll talk about the finale and some of the stuff that happened there. But I thoroughly enjoyed this. I would say that this is still like a 5.5 out of 6 for me, maybe a 6 out of 6. It is different in a lot of ways that matter, right? So like, Moon Knight is this sort of like unhinged, almost like a Punisher-esque character in the comics. Like, he has no qualms about killing people. He will brutally and relentlessly pursue his prey. He's famous in the comics for being unhinged and carving moons into people's foreheads when he catches his villains. I mean, this dude is like, and they softened him up for Disney Plus, which I think is important, right? Like, I think you can't have it like one of my favorite Moon Knight of all time is one of the new ones. Actually, it ties into Devil's Reign. And he full on like gouges out a dude's eyeballs with his thumbs. You cannot do that on Disney Plus. Like, that would not.
No, you're not gonna get away with that in a Disney Plus show.
And so imagining Stephen Grant doing that. Imagine taking MCU Stephen Grant and putting him in the comics would not fit. It does not fly at all. And vice versa. If you take comic book Stephen Grant or comic book Mr. Knight, who like beats people to death with a baseball bat, it just doesn't work. And so it is different, but I think it's different in the way that matters. I think this is one of the ones that actually like stuck the landing as far as what they changed from the comic books. Mm-hmm. Do I wish there was a world where we would get a Daredevil-esque Moon Knight? Yeah, dude, if we got that series, sign me up. But I think what they delivered to us is still cool in its own way. I have to sort of divorce it from the Moon Knight character that I love and enjoy from the comic books. But ultimately, like, they delivered on some things that I really enjoy. And I think it was way more emotional than I expected.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be, like, knockdown, drag-out fights and all of this. And they really touched on, like, the humanity of Steven and Mark and ultimately Jake, but we haven't gotten there yet. But
yeah. But I think that was I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head with that. I was expecting a very Daredevil-esque kind of like, like Marvel Knights-esque darker show. But I think the big thing was it wasn't really a Moon Knight show, it was a Mark Spector, Stephen Grant show.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was very much around them, and I don't say that as a necessarily bad thing. I know a lot of people were like, oh, I want to see more of the suit, and I'm like, for me personally, and this is speaking as a superhero fan, like, we've seen enough suit shows to a certain degree. Like, and it's not like we didn't get enough Moon Knight. Like, we got some really cool Moon Knight. Like, when he fought, like, the fight scenes were well choreographed and brutal. Yeah. It was good. Yeah, sure. But I think it was really interesting, like you said, like in the comics, he's very gritty, very like he's got no qualms about beating the crap out of people and killing people, and any incarnation of him, whether it's, like you said, whether it's Moon Knight, whether it's Mr. Knight, whether it's, Steven or Mark or Jake especially, But I thought it was really interesting for them to basically put all of that into Jake. Yeah. Who they ended up hinting at the end when we finally got to see him, but these little like blackouts where it was like it wasn't Mark and it wasn't Steven, and all of us who knew that it was like Jake was a third personality were waiting for that reveal, but putting that in him, and like him who Jake doesn't have qualms about doing that, and then juxtaposing that with Mark who does it because he feels he has to, but doesn't necessarily enjoy it. And then even taking it even further away, and we start off the show from the perspective of Steven, who's a complete pacifist, who doesn't do anything like that, and
he's a vegan. He doesn't, like
he is about as far away from that as you could get, and it was like, and I actually really enjoyed that because it made me connect with the characters of like, they were all very different from each other, but yet you felt for them. Like, obviously not Jake, because we didn't see him during the show. We don't know anything about him. He only appears in that end credit scene. Mm-hmm. But for Mark and Steven, like, I was completely invested in their journey in this show.
Yeah,
I thought it was really smart that we started with Steven.
Yeah,
and we followed his journey of him being the ride-along character, even though he's the main hero, because usually the ride-along character is someone that joins the hero and is exposed to this world. But it was really interesting having that be the hero, who doesn't know what's going on. You know, it's like, but I thought it was done very well. Like, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the emotional beats of it, the story. I loved how they spaced out, like learning about Steven and then learning about Mark's story and how they connected. And, you know, I think it wasn't until like episode 5 we found Mark's full backstory and how he became Moon Knight and all this stuff. And, you know, I think they've done it very well. I thoroughly enjoyed the road they took with it, and I think, kind of like as I said, probably because it was so different. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a different take on it.
I think it landed well because of the changes that they made, especially on Disney Plus. Like, I think if they tried to do a Daredevil-esque series on Disney Plus, but didn't, because they can't deliver the action. I don't know what Disney Plus's rules are about this, but they couldn't give us like a mature fight scene. And so I think the fact that they changed the focus to be about Steve and their emotional journey, I think that plays off better on Disney Plus, because you couldn't do Daredevil. It just wouldn't work on Disney Plus. They can't show that sort of visceral.
I'd like to hope if they do a season 2 we could see it, now that like Disney Plus has got that new mature rating for it, because they've added like the Netflix shows, like have all transferred over, so there's a possibility for that. I'd love to see if we can use Moon Knight as a bridge gap into season 2 for that. I doubt it, but I'd love to see it, you know.
We have a question in chat. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to catch that as well there. Ads is saying, it's like, if you had to pick one suit, would you pick Mark's or Steven's? So Moon Knight or Mr. Knight's suit? LJ thinks he knows what your answer is.
I had my qualms about the Mr. Knight suit. I know everybody loves this, but I don't like the weird stitching on his face. With the Mr. Knight suit. And the Mr. Knight suit, I wanted it to be like, if you've read Lemire's comics, there is his Moon Knight suit, or his Mr. Knight suit, always starts out nice and clean and tailored, and as soon as he enters the fray, he pulls off his jacket, rolls up his sleeve, and there's the one where he's just like beating dudes with, and that they teased that in the posters, and I was like, that's it. That's the one.
Well, you didn't like that he did that in like one scene. He took the jacket off and rolled it up.
Yeah, and I'm like, come on. So,
and then still got his ass kicked as well after he did that.
Yes. So as far as the MCU, I think the Moon Knight suit looks way better. In the comics, I have 2 answers. The first one is, it's in the middle of Dark Reign, or maybe it's the Initiative. He has an adamantium power armor suit. That one is dope. And then the second one is, I believe it's in Lemire and Smallwood as well. I could be wrong. He has a bone armor suit, and it's in like 1 or 2 issues. But that is my favorite Moon Knight suit of all time, is his bone armor suit. I think it looks cool. It's like a samurai, and then he has Khonshu's mask. It is. Oh,
yeah. I think I've seen pictures of that one. That's
I'll have to like drop pictures in Twitter or something. But
absolutely.
That's my pick. Are those 2 suits?
Yeah, I think they did well with the suits in the show, to be fair. Like, I think the Moon Knight suit itself was cool. I loved the mummy effect. Of like, it was wrapping him in bandages as if he was like this mummy or pharaoh that was getting called into a fight, and I'm like, I thought that was a really cool design to the suit.
Even the Mr. Knight one, like,
I'm not gonna lie, I love the Mr. Knight suit. Like, that suit looks sharp.
Yeah. I still agree with that.
The stitching on the mask is a bit weird, but like the actual suit itself, and I'm like, that is slick. Like, I would wear that suit. It looks so cool. And like, you see the first time that appears, I'm not gonna lie, that superhero landing when like he falls out the window and like hits the bar, and then all of a sudden, boom, and he lands in the suit. I'm like, oh, that was so cool.
And he sort of wobbles and falls. Gosh, it was
it's like he landed like, that's so cool, and then Steven falls over, and it's like, okay, it's still Steven.
Yeah, still Steven in there.
And then of course Mark's reaction, like, what the hell are we wearing? So
Yeah.
she said put on the suit, like not an actual suit. And like, and I love that it just stays though, that just becomes Steven's suit. And like, and it makes sense because like it's a good way to alternate between them. And I thought they did a really good job though later on in the show when they done like the changes, even during the final fight in the finale, like where they changed between Mr. Knight and Moon Knight suits.
Cool.
Yeah, Psycho Colonel Sanders. Good morning, guys, putting in there.
Yeah.
But like,
I'm interested to see what the suit is that they go for Jake.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Like,
yeah.
Is that going to be different again? Is it because like obviously they've set up that Mark's the Moon Knight suit and Steven's Mr. Knight, so is Jake going to end up in a different suit?
So I think the two theories that I've seen is one, the bone armor suit, which I think that one's not familiar enough to people unless they read the comics, and even then, like, it rarely appears, so I don't know if they're gonna go with that one. The other one I've seen is his sort of like modern suit that he has, where it's like almost looks like motorcycle armor, and it stops like right here with the breastplate. I think that's the one that they're gonna go with. It looks a little more like sporty and almost athletic than the other ones. But we'll see.
I feel like the bone suit feels like it's up Jake's alley just because he is that little bit more brutal.
I would love man, if they give us the bone suit, I'm gonna lose my mind.
I wondered if it was just going to be like, I don't know what suit it is from the run, but I've seen the pictures of like Moon Knight where it's like the black and white suit. So like it's like
okay, so
the black
that
mask and
yeah, so that is the Hunter's Moon. If you read Jed McKay's current run, which by the way, phenomenal, Jed McKay is killing it. That's not Moon Knight. That's the Hunter Moon, which is a different character. We'll read it because I don't want to spoil it. He's a very interesting character, but that one's not actually Moon Knight.
Oh, okay. So I seen that whoever was posting that was posting crap because they were posting that as a Moon Knight thing. And I wondered with that, just because like Jake seems to be very like Mark-esque in his Moon Knight fighting, so I wondered if they would just if they would do that and like just change the color a little bit, just as a kind of like slight variation.
This is the thing that's cracking me up too, and I know like MCU fans and Marvel fans have been experiencing this for years, but it's so funny going on TikTok and like suddenly everybody is a Moon Knight expert, and it's like they say some wild and crazy things, and it's like you just Googled this, you spent 5 minutes Googling this, reading a Wikipedia, and you're like, I know exactly what this is, and it just absolutely cracks me up some of the theories that people have based off of 5 minutes and a Google. But no, it's kind of it's wild.
But yeah, it's like this. It's going to be interesting to see what direction they go with some of this stuff. I do want to kind of take the turn to go into more of the stuff with Stephen and Mark, because that is the main focus of the story. Let's start off first of all just like talking about Stephen in general, as he is a ride-along character. What did you think of the take on Stephen Grant? How does that compare to him in the comics? Because obviously Stephen Grant in the comics is a bit different than we get him in the MCU.
So Stephen, for those of you that don't read the comics, Stephen is like, he's like a Bruce Wayne, right? He's this billionaire, he's wealthy, he's a playboy, he's confident and all this. And so when they started out Stephen as like the Stephen that we got in the TV series, I was like, what the heck? And I was originally very upset, and then it sort of delivered as it went on. Especially episode 2, they made him so like slapstick goofy, and I think they landed the plane at the end with Steven. I think that we got these nice emotional beats, but I was so thrown for a loop with this like almost Looney Tune-esque character that they had of him. And if you go back and listen to our podcast episodes, I talked about this. I was really concerned with the direction that they had for him. I think it paid off in the end, but I was expecting like a Bruce Wayne, like confident, swaggery, like this dude has all the money, all the power, and he
had none of that in the show, not even a little.
Like, literally nothing. He didn't have. He lived in, he had this like dopey British accent, but I kind of loved it. He was very endearing in the end, and I think that was the biggest surprise for me.
I think that was the thing with Steven, is like he did come across like I don't know the comics version and stuff like that, but Oscar Isaac as Stephen Grant was just so likable and so lovable. Like he was this goofball that was thrown into this stuff. He is not a brave and courageous man. He is very calm, very meek, very mild, very not part of this, doesn't ruffle any feathers, is in a crappy job he hates, all this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like thrown into this world, and it's like, but at the same time, like, all you could do is feel heart sorry for him and like completely get into his corner like an underdog, like as he tried to throw himself into this, and then he had this amazing character arc is like by the end, like even like once they both like get killed and are on like the, you know, the boat getting taken to the afterlife and stuff like that, is like he starts to like come out on his own and like wait a minute, you've got this fight, and like, but if you've got it, that means so do I can do this too if you can do it. And we start to see that other edge of Stephen coming out, even to the point in episode 5 sacrificing himself to save Mark, and it looks like he's killed himself and thrown himself into the sands and to do what, you know.
I want to touch on this because you brought it up, and it is like a very short part of the series, but it's one that kind of, it's probably my biggest gripe of the entire series, is we get that emotional beat with Steven where he sacrifices himself for the team. You know, he's left there on Duat, and you think that like you're gonna sort of sit in that for a while. Like we kind of knew he was gonna come back, but we weren't sure how. Immediately the next episode, within like 2 minutes, they're like, all right, we saved him, we're good, let's move on. And I'm like, man, that was such like an emotional sacrifice, and you didn't let us live in it for more than like 2 minutes.
See, I feel like that was a whole issue with the finale as well. Is like, I feel like it could have done with at least another episode.
I fully agree. Yeah.
At least another episode, because it felt like we shouldn't have came out of the duat, and we shouldn't have gotten Steven properly back until like midway to the end of episode 6, and then episode 7 be the fight with Harrow and that finale and that big, you know, ending to it. Because like, there was that emotional beat of Steven is gone, and you're like, but at the same time you're like, you know, like you said, he's probably going to come back, don't know how they're going to pull it off, and I'm like, but there's also that bit of like, is he though?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen with that? And don't get me wrong, I love the Mark bit though, like of him coming out of the field of reeds, like I can't stay here. Yeah. I can't just abandon him to the sands, like I need to save him, like this connection between the two of them we got at that point. But it was cool emotion. It was just very rushed, I felt.
So my theory, and I talked about this on the episode, I thought that it was going to be one of those things. I thought we were going to get the Jake Lockley reveal earlier. I didn't think we were going to get it in a post-credit scene. Mm-hmm. I thought we were going to have a moment where, you know, Mark finally gets his hands on Harrow, Jake Lockley takes over, and he's about to kill him. And I thought that's the moment we get Steve, right? Steve is still in there. He stops him from, you know, plunging in the dagger or whatever it is. Yeah. And to me, I was like, man, that would have landed a lot better than like, you know, Harrow dies anyways. You know, spoilers, but like he still dies, which they have to kill off another good villain.
Yeah, because that's of course what they have to do. It's like,
gosh, and then
I hate, because he was a phenomenal villain, and I would have loved to seen him come back in some capacity. Like, shout out to Ethan Hawke and Oscar Isaac, by the way. The two of them stole this show completely.
They killed it. And that's the thing too, is like Ethan Hawke was phenomenal, and I wanted to see him portray like a mentally fractured Harrow. Like I wanted to see him as a broken man, and like what that looks like as a villain.
I'd love to have seen, because that would have been almost the moment of like him having that duplicity that Oscar Isaac was showing.
Yeah.
Because you would have had in season 2, you could have had Harrow playing off of Ammit, who is now inside of him. So like he is literally the avatar for this god now. She is in him.
Yeah.
And like her being encased in there and what that would mean, and that'd be a whole new thing to discover. And I'm like, no, we're just gonna shoot him.
He's gone. See ya.
It's like, okay, like don't get me wrong, I get he was like created for the show and stuff, but like, you can still have him stick around for a little while. You know, you can still keep him, but no, we're not going to do that. We can't do that.
They needed a way to show that Jake was the one behind all the murders. I think there was a better way to do it than that.
Jake should have been revealed in the final fight.
Yeah.
At the very least, like the setups were all there, and that final time that he blacks out and then Harrow's down, and that's the end of the fight.
Yeah.
That's when we should have seen it. We should have seen what he did, and I think I can almost kind of forgive that, because if they start season 2, like the first episode of that is like the story of Jake and seeing all the stuff we've seen already, but from Jake's perspective.
Well, and that's what we said too, is like Layla watches all this happen, because she even makes a comment like, oh my gosh, was that you? Give us that scene from her point of view. Like they should have shown us everything that happened, but like removed and in bits and flashes from what Layla sees. I don't know, man. I love this series, but the finale was good, man.
We should have seen Jake taking him down, because I think that was the moment in the finale they lost me. Was everything was like it was seeming fine. Like I can even look over, like, you know, like Mark goes to get Steven and can run across to do that and get him.
Yeah.
Like for however far he runs before the sands take him, even though Steven was taken instantly, he can just run across the sand.
Yeah. No one bothers him. There's no zombies.
I can let that go. Towerette being the thing that lets them get to the door, even though, like, you know, still nothing attacking them. I can let most of it go, but the moment when he's fighting Harrow, he's having this big fight, switching between Moon Knight and Mr. Knight, this fantastic, like, choreographed fight between them. We've got Layla now as the Scarlet Scarab, you know, joining the fight, which I thought was really cool. Thought she was a really good addition.
Fantastic, yeah, absolutely.
Her in that costume looked phenomenal. It was a really great thing to add her in there. I thought, okay, this is setting up, and the main defeat of your villain happens off camera.
Yeah.
It felt cheap and I felt lost, and I like the only way to redeem that is if in the episode 1 of season 2 we get to see it and focus on Jake and who he is and what he's doing, and that's the only way they can partially save it. At the same time, I think it's kind of been lost now.
Yeah.
That should have been the moment we got to meet Jake. Even if we didn't hear his name, even if we didn't anything, that was the moment of like, this is definitely the third personality.
And it's not like there were. We talked about how like they had to soften some things for the MCU, but that fight scene with the zombie shows me that they could have, they could add something in there, right? If they can get away with that zombie like trying to impale her with a bone, shows me that like they could have shown more and they didn't. And
absolutely. They could have gotten away with a lot in that fight scene and still kept it, you know, like PG-13 in the MCU range. Like they still easily, like, because it's not like we didn't see like a bloodied Harrow at the end of it. He's lying there with blood all over his face, so it's not like we don't understand something happened. You know, it's like it's this weird thing of like just not showing it, and I'm like, I felt a bit cheapened out by that.
I'm with you. Fully agree.
Maybe Jake shoots a side of his head to show how willing he is to do it. See, I could maybe see that ads, but like I doubt it highly, because the whole thing with Jake is he's basically a nut job. Like he doesn't care. He's just
will pull the trigger. Yeah, he will kill.
Yeah, he has got no qualms about it. Like, whereas Mark will do it, and this version of Mark is very apprehensive but militaristic almost at it. Like, I'm a soldier, so I'll follow orders even if I don't like it. Jake just doesn't care.
Yep.
Jake just does not give a toss. Like,
yeah. I love that, and for those of you who are interested in these characters, not from the MCU, but to see like the comic book perspectives behind them, like. I compare it to Batman. Batman we know and love, and Batman we have like an understanding of who he is. But he's an interesting character in that I feel like every person who writes him gives a different flavor of Batman. He's always like the core tenets of who Batman is relatively the same, but we do get these different versions. But if you're interested in reading Moon Knight comics, understand it from that perspective. Like there are things that are true about Moon Knight that are true across the board, but each and every writer that you have, and I think they always attribute it to his like multiple identities, but he's different from writer to writer. And so go read these comic books and you'll find some versions that are closer to the MCU versions and some that are like drastically different. And check them out. Like I always encourage you, read these comic books and see where these stories come from.
Absolutely. Like there's some phenomenal comics out there on these characters that deserve to be checked out. You know, it's like and that's the thing, Moon Knight's one of those characters, like you get different flavours and characters depending who's writing them. Moon Knight's probably one of the few characters where that actually benefits, because he has got such a fractured psyche and all these different personalities, and it actually adds to that. Like he's a bit different. Like, oh, why is he different? Well, he's kind of nuts. You know, it's like he's literally gone. Like he's got all these personalities and they're all off in some way.
It's probably my least favorite Moon Knight series of all time, but it does something interesting. Is Bendis's run? It's Brian Michael Bendis and Malieve, I think. And he, rather than like the different aspects of his personality and the different like Moon Knight versions that live in his head, it's different Avengers. So he has Spider-Man, Wolverine, and who's the third? Oh, Captain America. It's a horrible comic, but it's very interesting what they do with him. And so yeah, go. He's wild in the comics. Go read some of them.
Yeah, definitely worth checking some of them out, I think.
Glad I read some comics before the show. It gave me, this is LJ, gave me so much context. Even though I saw things, even I saw things I recognized too. I geeked out about the limo. The Spectre limo at the end was phenomenal. I love that.
Yeah.
If I can give you guys any recommendations, it would be Lemire's run, Lemire and Smallwood, and Warren Ellis and Jed McKay. The Jed McKay run that is currently going on, especially the one that ties in with Devil's Reign. 6 out of 6. That it's phenomenal. Go read comic books, guys.
Yeah, 100%.
The shows are fantastic. Go read comic books. And Cross has talked about it. I will always recommend watching or reading the comic books before watching the shows. But
yeah, absolutely.
I understand that's not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we'll always recommend that for any show, especially like, before we check out mostly the indie stuff. Like, definitely check out the comics. And for the heroes like this, the great thing about this is, like, even if you've seen the MCU show, go check out the comics, because Marvel characters change so much, like, between writers, like we talked about. Like,
Different.
It doesn't necessarily always tie into the comics anyway, so it's not like you're going to miss anything or spoil anything or not caught something. I'm like, go check them out. Some of these writers, like, even just like that, Lemire, like, writing Moon Knight, like, one of my favourite writers, 100%, that's a pick-up for me.
Yeah.
I just need to know who the writer is and who's doing work on it, and I'm like, yep, that's worth at least looking at.
That's the funny thing is, I actually like Brian Michael Bendis, but that is the worst Moon Knight comic of all time.
It depends what he writes for me. Like, Bendis can do amazing stuff, but he can also do horrible stuff. Like, there's no middle ground for Brian Michael Bendis for me. It's either really good or awful.
Yeah.
It's like he's written some of the best hero stories. Like, he's written stuff like, his Daredevil, his Ultimate Spider-Man. Like, he's had some amazing stuff. But he's also written some of the worst events in Marvel history. At the same time, it's like, it's completely hit or miss. There's no grey area for Bendis for me. And like, it's one of those things. He's just one of those writers. Like, he either gets it perfect or it's no, this is bad.
Or doesn't understand the assignment at all.
No. Yeah. I always feel like he does better with like street level characters, which is really weird. You say like the Moon Knight didn't land for you, because that's usually what he does good with, is like street level heroes is what he's usually good at.
It has moments. It has really, really funny moments. And LJ was talking about one of them. There is a bit where like he dresses up as Spider-Man to infiltrate this strip club, and there's like a whole funny thing that plays out with there. But overall, that arc is it's so bad. It's garbage. That's one that I recommend. Just skip it. Like, you don't need to know the stuff. They explain it in the other comics anyways. Even Ellis has, I think it's Ellis, the second half of his run gets like weirdly ethereal, and he talks about like, I don't know, it's just, the first half of that is phenomenal, the second half gets weird.
See, Ellis is is a weird choice to even write Moon Knight for me.
Oh, for real?
Because Ellis is like a cosmic guy.
Yeah.
Like, he usually does space stuff and like the cosmos and these big entities, so him to write something like Moon Knight seems completely out of his comfort zone. And it just seems like a really weird choice.
There is Hawkeye does, I'm trying to remember if that's Ellis or if it's Lemire. Okay, I have to tell you, this is my favorite story of comic books of all time. It's tangentially related, but it's more Hawkeye than it is everything else.
Hey, go for it, man. We're here for rants. We're here for good rants.
So, Jeff Lemire is one of my favorite writers of all time. He does a phenomenal job with all of his comics. And he did a Moon Knight run that I love, but he also did a Hawkeye run that I love. And the weird thing about his Hawkeye run, and this is confirmed a true story, so they were pitching who would take over after Fraction. And they started talking about this, and apparently, I'm trying to remember who was the Marvel like head at the time. I think it was Axel Alonso, and was dozing off during this meeting and didn't know what was going on. And all he heard was somebody asked, "Who should we get for Hawkeye? Who likes Hawkeye?" and because he was half awake, he didn't hear Hawkeye, he heard hockey. And so he just immediately spit out the top like Canadian writers that he knew.
No.
And that's how Jeff Lemire got Hawkeye, is because he thought that they were talking about hockey. And it's just, to me, that just cracks me up because he ended up delivering. I thought it was a fantastic run.
Yeah, like he's a phenomenal writer. Like you could literally give him anything and I would happily read it. Like Jeff Lemire's like a phenomenal writer. Like he's one of my favorites, and like I've not seen anything like anything he touches for me usually turns to gold.
Yeah,
like he can pull it off, but like that's phenomenal that he got handed that on a sheer like sleeping editor that wasn't paying attention. That's phenomenal.
Wasn't paying attention, thought they were talking about hockey, and he's like, he's Canadian.
Love it. That's amazing.
But yeah, read comics so you can find these guys, because Ellis, Lemire, fantastic. Again, Bendis is hit or miss. Doug Munch, who did the original Moon Knight run, is fantastic. That man had his fingers in everything.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing. Like, if you go back far enough in a character history, you usually find that they've got some real gold in them, and some phenomenal writers have picked up pens for them, and you usually end up. There's always something. Like every character's got somebody that's done a run on them that's worth checking out.
Absolutely.
So we kind of talked a little bit about the finale, but I want to talk about kind of like what's probably the biggest part of this show, and it's kind of the emotional punch of it, and is really Mark's story.
Yeah.
It kind of gets hinted at early, and I'll touch into some other stuff with like him and Layla, and him like running from her and stuff with all this history. But we get a really heartbreaking, like grounding backstory for him that is just. It was a rough watch, but it was a powerful watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because and it's really funny because like I think coming into it as like a comic book fan, like you and I probably both knew like, well, Mark Spector's like the main guy,
right?
The others are the other personalities. But I'm curious for anyone who didn't know Moon Knight, that thought kind of like Steven did himself, that Steven was the main personality and like Mark was the alternative,
right?
Because
this was interesting. Yeah, and a lot of people thought that like, I watched this with people who hadn't read the comic books and weren't even like big Marvel fans, and that was the question I got, is like, well, who's this Mark guy? And I thought that was interesting because we knew from our perspectives that like Mark is Moon Knight and Steve was the alternate personality, and so like confirmed exactly what you're talking about. And that's one of those things that I always wish as a comic book fan. For some of these IPs, I wish I could experience them once without the knowledge that I have. And
it's like
what that perspective is like.
Yeah, because there's really cool payoffs like that, like in episode 5. Because like episode 4, end of episode 4, they're searching for Amet, like they found Amet's tomb, because that's, for anyone who doesn't know, which I'm assuming you all do at this point, we've been talking for like 30 minutes and not explained the actual Moon Knight plot or anything.
Sure.
But the whole thing is like, the Egyptian gods are real, which, not a shocker, but in a world where Thor exists, so the Egyptian gods are real. They suck. They're really awful at what they do. Not even like they're just bad gods, like they just like literally are lazy ass gods that refuse to do anything, as we find later in the show. And they end up with avatars to do their bidding. Mark, Steven, Jake is the avatar for Khonshu, god of the moon. That's why he's Moon Knight. But the big villain created for this is Harrow, who is the avatar for Amet, which, FYI, I 100% thought in the finale he was going to get killed by Amet.
Yeah.
I 100% was waiting for it, because she never appointed him as an avatar. He appointed himself and took her first avatar's cane and the power with that. And I thought he was going to like dedicate his life to this and then like get killed. Didn't happen.
Sweet.
But that's literally where I thought that was going, but it ended up not happening. And his whole thing is bringing back Amet, who's been trapped in the little statues that a lot of the gods have been trapped in. Apparently this has happened to a lot of the Egyptian gods, because there's a lot of them in these little statues that we find later on when we go inside the pyramid. But yeah, so to get this, they have to find the tomb where it's buried, and it ends up being revealed as one of the ancient pharaohs, Alexander the Great, which I thought was a really cool little call to the Egyptian history, that was her previous avatar. Like, okay, that's cool. And completely fits If you look at the history of Alexander the Great and what Ahmet's thing is about, like punishing people before they do the wrong thing, and like yeah, that fits really well. Actually, that's a really cool kind of get. But he finds it. Mark finds it. Harrow comes in to get it and kills him. Like legitimately kills him, shoots him. At this point, Khonshu's been entrapped, so they don't have any powers. They can't heal. They end up in the afterlife and on the, I can't even remember the name of it, the ship that's going to the taking it to the field of reeds and is like judging their hearts. So the whole thing is that the scales aren't weighing, and to get the scales to weigh in balance so that they can enter the field of reeds, basically they have to work through their previous stuff, so ongoing stuff, and try and balance the scales. So to do that, Mark basically has to start talking to Stephen and opening up something he has like full blown refused to do.
Right.
So we start getting a bit of his backstory, which I love the juxtaposition of telling the backstory and then him like flashing to this safe space, which is like this mental hospital.
Right.
Where like Harrow, or a version of Harrow, is like his therapist and stuff, and like, because they even hint at it, like this, like, we create this mental space to be safe. Right. And it's this version of Harrow that tells him that, and it's like, and actually no, this is the safe space, so he doesn't have to confront any of this. I thought it was really cool juxtaposition with that.
Yeah.
But we basically find this whole backstory of Mark, which, when they were kids, he had a little brother, and they went to go and play, and ended up playing in a cave down by the waterfront. But as they went deeper into the cave, the tide started coming in, it flooded, and Mark made it out and his brother didn't.
Right.
His brother was killed, which is a weight he obviously carries, because I'm no doubt he feels responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
And in case there was any doubt in his mind that he should feel responsible for that, he basically has a jackass of a mother who abuses him, and like shouting abuse at this kid at the freaking wake in the house.
Yeah.
That it was his fault. Why, telling this kid like, why did you come back? Why wasn't it you that died? And all this stuff, and ends up like drinking herself into a stupor and like mentally abusing him, and won't show up to when his dad's trying to do a birthday party thing, and ends up later like we see physically abusing him and stuff like that. And it's like all this like this really horrible heavy stuff. Like this is
right.
Crazy. And we see like him like leaving the house and stuff like that, and his dad trying to convince him to stay. And really interesting thing with the dad, because it's something a lot of people said afterward, was like that, why didn't you stop her?
Right.
Because like the dad's there, but the dad's almost passive to it all and doesn't actually do anything to step in and protect his son.
And that's, if I can touch on this for a second too. So this is something that I'm very like intimately familiar with, and I saw a lot of takes on the internet about like people were, you know, TikTok theorists and Twitter theorists and all this were like,
yeah,
how cool would it be if Jake was the one who went back and killed the mom or whatever? And I hate that take fully.
That is just horrible. Like, because this guy
so
doesn't.
Dark.
This guy doesn't have enough mental issues without. Oh, by the way, the reason your mom died was like this alternate version of you killed her.
It's your fault, right? And so people are so quick to hate on the mom, and I agree. Everything that she did was inappropriate. People are very hung up on the physical abuse, but there was also a lot of emotional abuse.
Oh yeah, like she laid into him. Yeah.
My thing with this mom too is like she clearly has mental trauma that she is fully not processing in proper ways, and two, like the one responsible adult in the situation is not doing his job to remove his child from that situation and get his wife the help that he needs.
Yeah, your wife's clearly struggling, your son's getting abused by her because of this, and you're basically just sitting there doing nothing for years.
Yeah.
Because by the time Mark leaves, it's Mark leaving to like go to college. It's like he's college age. Like, so this has been going on since he was like grade school, like since before high school.
Right.
So it's like this has been going on for years, and it's like, why didn't you step in?
Yeah.
Why didn't, like, because like you're obviously dealing with this as well. You lost a son as well, but like you're watching your wife crumble and fall apart and take it out on your son, and you're watching your son suffer, and you're not saying anything, and it's like, dude, come on.
And you look at it in the pursuit of whatever this is, you know, I think he was afraid to lose his wife, afraid to lose his child, and it's like you lost all three. You know, you lost two boys and a wife.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you lost everything as a result.
Yeah, and to anyone who's in chat and like understands this perspective and has dealt with some of this stuff yourself, I escaped to comic books when I was a kid. It was how I processed a lot of this stuff. And ironically, Moon Knight was the character that I ran to when I was a child. But in modern history, and I've talked about this on the podcast, and I'll talk about it again with everybody I meet. There is a comic book out there by one of my favorite artists, Scotty Young. It is called Middle West, and it deals with the cycle of abuse. It deals with trauma. It deals with, you know, a lot of this stuff. And whether you are familiar with this or not, I would say this is an absolute must read. Yeah, there it is. It's this incredibly powerful story. Yeah, there it is. It's this incredibly powerful story, and it's wrapped up in like this really fun and kind of cute aesthetic, which does not fit the tone at all.
No. Like right for the get go with it as well.
Yeah.
Like I've not read much of it. I've only read the first issue of it so far.
Oh my man, you are in for a ride.
But like the tone of it is like the drawing style of it is not like the story at all. Like, the story jumps in hard to like what this kid is going through, and it's like it's a rough read.
If you have Mixology, or if you have access to Barnes and Noble or Amazon, I would recommend maybe reading it before you decide to purchase it. I wouldn't purchase it on a whim, but if you have Comixology, go read this. It is phenomenal, and it deals with the stuff that we're talking about, everything that happened in Moon Knight. So that's my 2 cents on that.
No, absolutely, and I think that was a great thing about the show, was approaching something like this. I always love when we try and hit on real topics as well, because like with the superhero genre especially, it's very easy to get caught up in the larger than life battles. But it's important for characters like this, which ironically, seeing Spider-Man in his last movie, like, you know, dealing with multiversal stuff and other versions of him and all this, when he's actually one of the characters that fits the other side of it so well, is the street level characters. We should be kind of looking at them like, oh, here's something that's not this world altering thing.
Yeah.
Here's actually this, you know, like that was the whole thing. Like Daredevil, if you watch the Daredevil show, is like, what's happening in my city, what's going on in everyday life,
and more,
you know, and bringing it back down to earth, which I think you need both in the superhero genre. But like to address something like this, with like, here's one of these great heroes who's an avatar for a literal god, but here's what he's dealt with in his life, and in fact the whole creation of the Stephen Grant persona. And I love the way Mark even describes it to Stephen, because he even starts freaking out, like, wait a minute, you created me. And that's a whole thing for him to realise, hey, I'm not the original. And he says, but that was kind of like the whole thing. You had this amazing memory of her. You have this great relationship with her.
Yeah.
It's like, hell, you remember her being alive.
Right. He still calls her, and that's the thing, is like...
Yeah, that's one of the things he does all the time. He's on the phone to his mum. She never answers, but he's always calling her and leaving her messages.
That compartmentalization in light of all the trauma and abuse makes sense. And then, you know, I was wondering how they were going to deal with the mental health aspect of this, because this is one of the rare misses for me with Hawkeye. You know, Hawkeye as a character, he deals with his deafness because of abuse that happened in his childhood. A lot of a trauma, and he ran away from home because I can't remember if it was his foster family or what, but and they used his being deaf as they use it well in about one scene, and that's about it. They don't really
it was a throwaway thing in the series. Like, it was...
and I'm like, it's such a big piece that they can use, and then you have Alekwa Cox, and this is part of the reason why I'm so excited about Echo. But again, like, they don't... I feel like they could have done a better job talking about, you know, some of the things that go into...
If Echo had not been in the Hawkeye series, I guarantee you he would not have been deaf.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. Rough. It felt like such a throwaway thing. For something that's such a big part of his character, and it can be used to such an amazing extent for Hawkeye. Especially when, like, one of the big things they're trying to push now is representation.
Right.
To have, like, one of your main original 6 Avengers being deaf and having that cat. Because think about it, think of like stuff where representation is seen when it's not even explicit. Like I always remember like the letter that our mom wrote about our kid being excited when Drax took stuff literally.
Oh yeah.
Because like Drax was seen like, well, I'm autistic and I don't get the social cues and I don't get stuff like that and take things very literalistic, which hits whole way new with having an autistic kid. It's like, that's amazing. There's representation there, but you have a literal hero with a literal known disability that you're now introducing. Should have been introduced ages ago, but we're finally introducing it, and then we did nothing with it, and it literally plays no factor. And I'm glad they hit the nail on the head with Moon Knight, and I'm glad they represented us well. I have never been through that sort of physical and emotional abuse. I have never gone through that myself, so I'm speaking as someone who's not experienced that, but I think they done a good job portraying it.
It lands well, and I think there are one or two ways that this could have gone wrong, and I think it is a sliding scale. If you lean so hard into that it's almost like satire of the things that he went through. That's a disservice. But at the other point of it, if you soft pitch it and you don't talk about it, and or you just briefly mention it and don't make it a part of his character development and his character journey, then that's also doing it an injustice. And I think the balance that they struck here was powerful. Like I talked about this with my wife, and I talked about it on the podcast. Like I watched this. I was not prepared. I actually watched this during my break at work because I was like, I need to pick me up. I'll go watch Moon Knight. Not a pick me up, by the way. So I was sitting in my class just bawling my eyes out, trying to like figure out how to like go about the rest of my day, because they did it so well. Like I really appreciate the way that they handled this in the series. For sure. I think the representation there was on point.
It was done really well, but it was also done to a good extent where like you couldn't then pull it back and get back into the show and back into the superheroics and the gods fighting each other and all that side of it. It was done really well.
Yeah.
What I'm excited for in season 2 is seeing, well, if that's how Steven was created, at what point was Jake created?
Yeah.
And how did that come around then? Like, was he created around the same time, or like a lot of people are theorizing, was that like during his military experience, and like, you know, some of the stuff that he's seen was Jake created during that, and like was Mark asked to do some of the horrible stuff and like couldn't deal with it, and then that's where Jake came in.
So in the comics, they sort of flip it, and you get Jake was created at the moment of his childhood abuse as a way to like vent his anger and release his trauma. And I think as somebody who's dealt with some of this stuff, there is you feel like unjustly angry at certain things, and at the same time, especially when it's somebody you love that is inflicting the abuse on you, you also remember all the good things about him, and that's a weird place to be, because how do you love somebody so much but also they hurt you in ways that you can't explain to anyone? So you have this anger and this like childlike love for somebody, and it feels dichotomous. It feels like you have these parts of yourself that are wrestling. And so to introduce that as a character who literally struggles with these things, not just on an emotional level, but like an actual personality level, is powerful.
That'd be a really interesting thing to see in season 2 then, if he was created during the abuse. Like Steven was his way to escape the abuse he was seeking, but taking out that rage and anger, and like even as a kid maybe to see him like attacking other kids or bullying other kids or like taking that aggression out, like as Jake is formed through that, and like almost like to deal with what was going on, he almost like split in two different directions, two like polar opposites of each other that way. Which I think would be an interesting kind of direction to go with, like, because we've seen a lot of like Steven in this kind of like meek and mild, calm version of him, but like this hardcore, like, I don't care, I don't give a damn about anything, you know, nothing in the world matters to me mentality of Jake. Would be really interesting to see those two being fostered separately. LG just speaking about the representation, saying, I know it's more of a superpower, but Daredevil's blindness is why I connected with that character as a person with low vision. And that's it. And I think that's one of the cool things about superheroes, was representation was important, you know. Like even just something simple in the original days of like the creation of Spider-Man and him being a teenager was seen as like this mind-blowing thing when he was originally created.
Kind of a nerd, and yeah.
You know,
and go ahead.
And I was gonna say, but Marvel kind of tried to keep that trend going of like creating representation.
Right.
Daredevil especially, I think, is one of those ones because like there's not. You can look at other heroes and go, well, this character's kind of like that one. There's no one like Daredevil.
Yeah,
Daredevil
absolutely.
is very unique in a lot of ways, and that blindness is like there isn't a hero elsewhere in Marvel or in DC that kind of is on that same level in that way, which is really interesting.
And that's why I really like Alekwa Cox for everything that she's involved in, because I live in a native community. A lot of my students and a lot of my friends and family are native, and so you have that aspect of it. Like, there are no Native American superheroes on the big screen. Hasn't happened. And so if you get her in there in a recognizable position, and this is, we talk about on our podcast, we talked about Reservation Dogs did this in quite a big way, where a lot of my students were able to see themselves in a major production. And then you have a lot of students here and a lot of the people I know who are amputees, who do not have their lower limbs, and Alekwa Cox is missing her leg. And then we have deaf representation in there as well. So the MCU is starting to get there, and Moon Knight was a big one. Obviously, we didn't even touch on the Egyptian representation.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a
when we got
whole.
there.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. Like the fact of like, Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, whatever you want to call him in this movie, is Jewish apparently.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that until his mom died,
Yeah.
and we were at the wake, and like, it's like, oh, he's Jewish. Nice. Didn't realize, but like, that's awesome.
It's an interesting part of his character in the comic books, because he is still Jewish, right? But yet he's talking to an Egyptian god, and there's always that weird sort of dichotomy where, like, I still believe in Yahweh.
It's like
he's like, but also, like, I said,
a Jewish hero that is slave to an Egyptian deity.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Well, there's some sort of commentary right there, isn't there? Like, just in that. But then we even got that with Layla in the show, though. Like, which they even like. Which, okay, it was a little on the nose when they did it, but her becoming the Scarlet Scarab, by the way, phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm all for her being an avatar. I'm all for her being a hero.
Very cool.
But like her saving a little girl and the little girl going, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" and her going, "Yeah," and I'm like, it was a little on the nose for like look, we've got an Egyptian representation, like especially when like 5 minutes before she went to Tawaret and said, "I'll be your avatar temporarily."
Yeah.
I'm like, so are you just the avatar now for this god? Have you just like, this is what I do? Like, because you're saying you're an Egyptian superhero and giving hope to this little girl, and that, but like you're literally about to give this back. But I loved it. I loved her inclusion. I loved her like being part of it. I love her being a hero, and I love that we are getting that representation as well. Because like an Egyptian hero, like awesome, something I never thought we'd see.
My wife has curly hair like that too, and I know a lot of the heroes that we get have like the nice, the straight hair, and you don't see enough that have like curly hair, or even like representation from the Egyptian community. My wife is not Egyptian; she's native, but she has really curly hair like that. And I saw some of the comments on like TikTok and Twitter about people saying like, my daughter saw this, and she doesn't want to straighten her hair anymore. She's proud of like how she looks, and I think that's really cool.
I think that's it, and I think that's the thing as well. Like speaking as a straight white man, like in the Western world, like I've never been lacking in representation and things. Like never been a problem. Like all the heroes I looked up to, even in comic books, like they all look like me.
Right.
Like for the most part, like different hair color or eye colors, but the most diverse it would get. So like it's something I definitely didn't realize until very recently, especially with how much change there's been in terms of representation, like how important it is to have that representation that you can associate with. For little kids to grow up that are black or Native American or Asian or Hispanic or whatever, to look up and go, that's a hero like me.
Right.
That's a hero that looks like me, and I can aspire and be like them. Like how many little black kids were inspired by seeing, T'Challa becoming the Black Panther and seeing how cool this hero was, or how many Asian kids were like, wow, that Shang-Chi is like he's a hero and he's part of the MCU, and not just like side characters or sidekicks, but headliners now, headlining their own stuff, and how important that representation is.
it's related to what we're talking about, and it's something Ads brought up in the chat. He said, "I'd love if they did a second season to see Bushman." I've pushed back against this, and I've read probably every Moon Knight comic in existence. I think Raw Bushman is an interesting character. The reason I don't want them to bring him into the MCU is there was a time, I want to say in the late 80s, early 90s, where the KKK movement believed this to be a hero of theirs, right? They saw this guy in a white hood whose main villain was an African, violent mercenary. And so I don't know if people will understand the distinction there. I don't want this to look any sort of way. And so I have been on record saying I hope they don't bring Bushman into this, even though I love him as a character.
I don't think they will, because they already alluded to him in the show.
Right.
That he was the commanding officer of the military group that Mark was with.
Right.
That went to slaughter Layla's father and all the crew there, and that he put an end to.
I think if anything, they from the sounds go after him, but yeah.
And from the sounds of it, it was very much kind of hinted at of well, he stopped it, and that's what killed him, was taking out these guys that were killing the innocents, and why he was close to death. I think that's probably the closest we're going to get to Bushman. Just because of what you said of when you're taking an African American character, you're taking a black character and portraying them as the villain,
and he's being pursued by a guy in a white hood.
You have to be
not look great.
Yeah, when a black guy is the villain, you have to be careful with that. And a guy in a full white suit going after him, and it's I could see where that could look problematic, and even if it's not meant in that way, even if it's completely not taken in that way, even if it's he's not a white supremacist, we've clearly set up that he's Jewish, that he's he's of a different he's Guatemalan, he's got a different skin tone, he doesn't even look white, you can tell he's not. Nonetheless, it's Disney and Marvel are very careful, or try to be as careful as they can be. They've screwed up a few times, but they try to be as careful as they can be of that representation and how stuff is perceived, because especially in a world with the internet the way it is today, it doesn't matter what your intentions are, it matters of how it was perceived.
Right.
Probably and even more so than the intentions. It's people have had to apologise plenty of times because something was taken the wrong way by so many people, even if it was never meant in that way. Sure. And it's that's just too easy to go down that road with it. He says, that I didn't know, and upon hearing that, it's best you don't.
That's the thing too, is a lot of people have brought that up, and I'm from a comic book perspective, I would love that. In the political climate that we live in the world today, I don't think it's a good idea.
Well, that's it. I think that's why we got Harrow as the villain in this, because Harrow was created for the show. Harrow was not a comic book character.
Right.
Which is hard to believe because he seems like such a phenomenal villain. I loved Harrow in this. Ethan Hawke as Harrow was one of the best things in this show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's sort of an amalgamation, because there is a Harrow, but he's not. He's wildly different from this. He's sort of this geneticist who does all this stuff, but he is sort of a mix of a few characters that do exist in the comics. But I think they made him different enough where the Ethan Hawke version is the one that I subscribe to. I think he's more interesting in this than anything else.
But that's one of the reasons I think I heard them kind of talking about why that character was probably the one that was created, was because you've got Moon Knight's main villain as Bushman, who they're probably not going to do for the reasons we talked about, and I think them mentioning him as his commanding officer that done this horrible stuff and that he tried to stop is probably the Easter egg to that we're not going to get him, but that's as close as we can. But Moon Knight really doesn't have that many big villains beyond that.
We had Midnight Man, which tragic passing there. That would have been interesting to see going forward.
They tell us a little bit about that, because they were obviously hinting at that a little bit in the show, and then that's now something when, unless they recast or whatever, we can't really go anywhere with that.
So Anton Mogart is Midnight Man, and he's this eccentric collector who lives for the thrill of the hunt in sort of a literal and figurative manner. He wants things that are unobtainable. and so his position with Moon Knight is really interesting because he's committing all these crimes, and he wants Moon Knight to know that it's him, and they have this big showdown. So he's interesting, and I think that would have been a nice like way to introduce him as a villain into the MCU. They did a good job with the bit that he was in there. As far as it goes, though, like his villains are, I don't know. The only other one I could think of is and this is so cheesy, but there is Shadow Knight, which is Randall Spector. It's his brother, who survives a horrific accident and has no recollection for a while, and ends up, with this fractured identity because of the trauma that he went through physically. His is obviously, in the case of the comic books, it's him coming back from war. But you could easily slide this into the MCU as he survived the accident. He didn't drown at all. Somebody found him and nursed him back to health, and he was, lost his memory and had to deal with all this trauma. So I think there are interesting characters to pull in from the, from the lore.
I really hope they don't do the Shadow Knight one from the sounds of it. Just
right.
For two kind of reasons. Like the first one being we've done the hero versing the other version of him so many times.
Right.
Like I don't think we need that again. And secondly, as soon as you bring his brother back from the dead, you undercut all the emotional journey we just went on in this season.
Right, I agree.
And I
totally agree.
Don't do that. Leave his brother dead. The journey and the setup for Mark Spector and Stephen was so well done in this. I would not want anything to interrupt that. Create another one. Like, I mean, come on. We had freaking Khonshu fighting Ammit in this like kaiju fight in Egypt. I want to see more like Egyptian. So I love the Egyptian lore. I love the Egyptian lore in this. Like, I love the Egyptian gods and all this stuff. Like, anything like to do with that sort of lore and gods and mythology, I love all that stuff. So the fact that they focus so much in that in this, I'd be up for more of that. Or have him face other gods. Have him like, how would Khonshu react like if Moon Knight bumped into somebody like Thor? It's like, or gods from other pantheons, or listen to one of your episodes. We're actually listening to your episode back for a trip from DC when you and Max were talking about, hey, wouldn't it be funny if like the God Butcher showed up in Moon Knight? And I hate you and Max so much because as soon as that was mentioned, I'm like, that's all I wanted to see was him just show up with a cameo at the end of this now, and just like, hey, see all those crap Egyptian gods that were left that weren't, like trapped away? Yeah, all of those ones are dead now because God just showed up and wiped them out, and the only ones are left are all the ones that get broken out of their like stone prisons, and I'm like, that would have been cool.
Gosh.
And like in my head I'm like, that's never going to happen, but like that's all I want to see happen now is like, let's Moon Knight versus Gore the God Butcher. I'm down for it. Let's do it.
Oh my gosh, that would be phenomenal. It'll never happen in a million years.
Oh no.
I say that knowing like,
no,
Moon Knight I never thought would happen in a million years, but even like if they did Age of Khonshu, where Khonshu takes over and he has to try to stop Mephisto because Mephisto is becoming too powerful, and so Moon Knight just single-handedly like wipes out the Avengers, and it is one of my favorite runs of all time. It's very short-lived, but a storyline like that where he's like, I can stop Mjolnir because Mjolnir is made of a moon. Like, what are you gonna do to stop me? Him taking on like Iron Fist and stuff like that would be really cool.
That'd be really cool. Like, I think that's the thing with Moon Knight. I think if they do go into a season 2, there's still going to be that emotional part because we have to explore Jake now.
Right.
But I'm like going to the back crap crazy stuff. Let's just like continue this. Like, let Harrow and Ammit be like the beginning, but let's delve into the crazy world because I want to set up the Midnight Suns and like have him meet like Punisher or like,
right,
or Blade or Ghost Rider, or like delving into this like crazy ass side of Marvel. Like, go for it, And I was just saying there, it's like can't wait to see Christian Bale and Thor. Absolutely. The fact that Gore the God Butcher is showing up at all in the MCU still blows my mind.
I never in a million years thought that we would get that, but I also didn't think we would get Moon Knight.
No.
So.
But especially at this point where Thor is, like, we've done the trilogy, we've had the, Endgame, and Thor's going off on this, like, journey now of, like, self-discovery, and then And I'm like, how the heck is that going to transfer into him then fighting, like, you know, the God Butcher who's massacring gods across time and space? Is like, how? How are we going to transition into that? Like, that's insane.
And it's Taika Waititi who's like, just goofy. You know what I mean? Like,
how do you make this? Like, how do you make this serious?
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm all in though. I'm like, if I'm up for seeing them pull it off, but yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like, there's. Because that's the thing for me with Moon Knight, and kind of like I was just saying it there, you know, we've started seeing some of these connections. Like at the end of Eternals, we saw the setup for Black Knight, and we heard the voice of Blade, although nobody really realised it was Blade until somebody explained it to them, because that's the way we all were. Like, who was that? Who was talking? What?
Yeah.
We're setting that stuff up, and I'm like, he has to be part of it. Moon Knight has to get into this, because we've done like we've kind of done the Marvel Knight stuff, because that's now the Defender stuff. We've got the Daredevil and the Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Punisher. We've got the Marvel Knights darker stuff. But now we need to do like the dark supernatural stuff, like the stuff that... Because the Avengers are all up here doing their thing, but like there's this whole other side, the spooky supernatural stuff, where the only real crossover is probably stuff like Doctor Strange occasionally.
And that's the thing, if they do Midnight Suns... The arc that I like for Midnight Suns is where Mephisto, through whatever deal, takes over Las Vegas, and Doctor Strange bets his soul.
Yeah.
That Midnight Suns would be so cool, because you'd have Blade, you'd have Moon Knight, you'd have all these other characters, and it would tie into something like Multiverse of Madness, and maybe redeem a little bit of that movie for me.
Yeah, it's like that'd be the potential for that. Like Mephisto finally coming in, which a lot of people have been speculating about that since the freaking WandaVision.
Oh
like,
my
Mephisto's
gosh.
going to be part of it. Mephisto's going to be part of it, and I'm like, no, bring him in as a villain for Midnight Suns. That's perfect. That is like literally the best place to bring him in if you're ever going to do him, and have this like, you know, it's like bring in like, you know, Moon Knight, bring in Blade, bring in Black Knight, bring in Doctor Strange, bring in freaking one of the Ghost Riders, like.
Oh my gosh!
You know,
we could get the Ghost Riders,
like,
Robbie Reyes.
Yeah, bring in a Robbie Reyes. Like, I mean, hell, even bring back that guy that played him in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He wasn't that bad. Or bring in the freaking, you know, it's like
Nick Cage.
Yeah, bring in Nick Cage. Hell yeah. Only if it's from Spirit of Vengeance one, where he's completely lost his mind. But bring in, like, you know, because there's like 3-4 Ghost Riders. Bring them in. Bring in one of them. We've not seen any in the MCU, you know.
Somewhere, wherever he is, I know Isaac's on vacation right now, so he's driving around wherever in the continental U.S. He just shed a happy tear, and he has no idea why. That is his boy, 100%.
Nick Cage. Like, see if he does show up in the Multiverse of Madness, which spoilers, Nick Cage doesn't show up in it, so spoilers for that. But
sorry,
see if he'd shown up in Multiverse of Madness, I would have freaking lost my mind.
Yeah.
Like, because that would have just been so random, but at the same time, I would have cheered.
Oh my god!
Just because, like. But yeah, that's like I think that'd be the perfect place to go with Moon Knight, is to do more stuff in the next season, but set up for like a Midnight Suns and start doing that darker supernatural stuff. But I don't know if we'll get that. So to kind of wrap up then, just the last little bit. Obviously, we defeated Taro, we trapped Amit in his body. Mark and Steven were set free,
right,
from being avatars of Khonshu, and are allowed to be, you know, themselves and are living happily together. But then we got our end credit scene, as we talked about, where Jake Lockley finally appears, finally shows up, and kills Harrow.
Just nukes him. Just completely takes him
just
down.
Totally wipes him out. But I thought it was a cool way of introducing him to a certain extent.
Right.
But as someone who knows obviously a lot more about Jake Lockley and his story, and we've talked a little bit, what did you think of that as the introduction for him and how his character's coming across at this point? Obviously we've not seen a lot of him.
Right.
And also as well the fact of like he only speaks Spanish.
Yeah, so that was an interesting choice.
And I'm
watching.
Was that just like another way to vary like the fact of like, you know, Steven has an English accent and like Mark has an American accent, so he's going to speak Spanish, or like is that something Jake does?
No, so Jake in the comic books is just like he just has this like New Yorker accent.
I was gonna say because he's like a New York cabbie, you know. It's like that's like his like cover while he does all this stuff. So,
so I've been watching a lot of interviews with Oscar Isaac, and he talks about this was from the Star Wars days. He talks about how he wanted Poe Dameron to be from Yavin 4 because those scenes were famously filmed in Guatemala, which is where he's from, and in every like IP that he's part of, he always pushes. Which ironically, like when he's in X-Men, he's playing an Egyptian character as well. But he always longed to have like that Guatemalan representation in one of his characters, and so my guess is that this sort of was spurred on by that Oscar Isaac wanted a Spanish-speaking Guatemalan character in the MCU, and I'm here for it. I think it's really cool, but it is like really jarring at first to try to figure out like, wait, what's going on here? He is stone cold, and that is par for the course. I thought it was a cool way to introduce him. I wish they would have introduced him earlier, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. I thought the way that they ended it was pretty cool.
I think I'm glad they introduced him.
Yeah.
That end credit scene raised the finale for me.
Absolutely.
Like to a better level. Like I was like so disappointed until I seen that, and like it automatically made it better. Mm-hmm. Like kind of like you, I agree we should have seen him sooner. Like, I still think that bit when he jars at the end and he's fighting Harrow and it's clear that Jake did something, we should have seen that happening. Mm-hmm. We should have seen what he did. Even if they don't explain that he's Jake until, like, the end credit scene.
Yeah.
And Khonshu reveals, like, you know, yeah, I've let them go, but he still works for me. And that Jake Lockley is still quite happily doing it. I think it's cool that we're getting the... Kind of like LJ saying in chat, it's cool that we're getting a Latino representation a lot in Marvel now, and it's cool that we're getting that with him wanting, like Oscar Isaac wanting to represent his Guatemalan roots. He's clearly been very forth on wanting to do that in a lot of projects, as you said. So the fact that we're getting that, like, I'm not gonna lie, the Spanish speaking threw me completely at first. I was not expecting it, you know, because you're watching the show and all of a sudden you've got subtitles to read. Wait, what's going on? What?
Yeah.
It just, especially with an end credit scene, I wasn't expecting it, but like I'm here for it because I'm interested to see like how that blends in, because like some of the great stuff we got in the final episode was Oscar Isaac like literally having conversations with himself. Like we'd seen like the mirror talks before,
right? But
like we were literally watching scenes of him as Mark talking in an American accent, and change while the camera was still rolling into Steven and talking the English accent, and it'd be seamless. Which props to Oscar Isaacs for the amount of work he did in this show. The guy was phenomenal.
Yeah,
like it's crazy how good it was. It's like, especially that scene. The scene I'm thinking obviously is like that last scene when he's in the office with Harrow, when he gets rid of that little safe space.
Oh yeah.
And like, but you see the two of them just blending in and out of conversation with each other, like nothing. And he's just, but like just with a change on the look in his face, you can tell who's about to speak.
Right.
It's so well.
It really
so,
sells it as two different people and have.
So
yeah, like that brings up the question: like, does Steve know Spanish? You know what I mean? How are their conversations going to play out? Like, what we assume Mark does, right? Because you know Jake does, but.
Yeah, because I assume he does, because like I'm guessing like there's going to be the Guatemalan roots are still going to be there for the Mark Spector character as a whole.
Correct.
And we're going to do that, so the chances are there's a bit of Spanish speaking there, maybe not as fluent as Jake, but enough to kind of have a conversation. Like as far as Stevie knew, he grew up in like London. He grew up in like away from this all. Like, does he have a clue? Like, can he talk to him? Is it he studied Egypt? So like, has he studied other countries as well, and like maybe knows a little bit or? But like I think it's a really cool way to differentiate that character again and do something different with it.
Right.
As long as it's used properly going forward.
Yeah.
Because like, there's a really easy way for them to just kind of like throw it away as a stupid thing that's not really going to work well.
Yeah.
But if they do it in the right way, like it could work, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, I think they've done a really good job. This is still one of my favourite Marvel series. I think the ending of it definitely was a letdown to what it could have been. Like, if that ending had been on point, it 100% would have been my favourite.
I think objectively, Loki ultimately was a better series, start to finish. Personally, because of the emotional beats and the fact that it's Moon Knight, which has always been my favorite character, it ranks number one for me. But I think to recommend this to anybody, I think Loki is the better property right now. And I think a lot of that
Yeah.
has to do with how they landed the finale.
Yeah, I think start to finish, if you want to talk about the properties, I think Loki beats it out for me. That's probably my
Mhm.
favourite. One Division I'm kind of back and forth on, because like I
Yeah,
really love what they did different with that show, but at the same time, like getting into it's a bit jarring until they start to explain what's going on.
right.
But if you're talking beginning to end, I think Loki's the better property. But like Moon Knight, 100% would have been my favorite if they'd landed the ending.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they pulled it back at the end, and I think they could pull it back even more if season two
Hmm.
goes into the Jake Lockley stuff. That way, I think as a whole, it could feel good. But the first season, I think just it missed that last little bit,
Hmm.
and that's my only worriment for going forward with Disney Plus shows. Is there's been a couple of shows where the ending now has let down the whole series.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
agree.
feel like they did the same thing with Hawkeye. Hawkeye was on par to be like my favorite MCU Disney Plus show. I thought they were doing so well with it. I thought the beats were perfect, the storyline and storytelling was right on point, and then the finale, especially what they screwed up with Kingpin, just
Right.
caused
Oh
that
my gosh.
show
Yeah.
to tank for me. Moon Knight wasn't
Forget it.
that bad, like a drop off at the end, but it definitely knocked it down a little bit from where it was. Like it was like you said, like a 5 out of 5. You know, for me, this show was, you know, everything was like the first 5 episodes. Like I thought they were perfect. I thought they were awesome.
Right.
Like it was my type of story. I was completely invested, but I definitely wasn't as invested with the finale. I thought they dropped some stuff, and that definitely affected it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm with you.
You know. So I know you kind of said it at the start. So what sort of rating would you give this one? Would you recommend Moon Knight? And
I think it's a 5 out of 5 or 5.5 out of 6 for me. It- It's
you
hard.
Infinity Bros and you're out of sixes.
Yeah, no, and it drives everybody nuts that we use decimal points as well. But
You know,
someday
you've
we'll
already
change this
added on
up,
an
right?
extra number. You don't need decimal points to.
Right. um, it is my favorite series, but I get that it's not for everybody, and I think episode 5 emotionally, if you're not prepared for it, can cause some harm. Um,
Absolutely, yeah.
I think you need to be in a right place emotionally to handle what's going on in that. And so I will absolutely recommend it for people, but I will say ahead of time, like, make sure you're mentally prepared for the things that you're going to experience. And ultimately, like, it is a phenomenal series, but it's not perfect. And so I think enjoy it for what it is. I love it. It's
Absolutely.
Moon Knight, so like, how could I not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's it. I think for what they did with it, like, just the sheer fact of, like, if you told me they were doing a Moon Knight show, like, back during, like, the start of the MCU, because, like,
I would have never believed you.
you know, at that sort of point when you're thinking, like, oh, what characters are we going to see pop up? What characters are they going to allude to? Moon Knight was in no way.
Right.
Like, even in my head, like, it still doesn't quite make sense. Like, when you think of the other, like, Disney Plus shows that were announced, like, Loki, absolutely. Falcon
Yeah.
and Winter Soldier, WandaVision, you know, it's like all these characters that have appeared in the major movies. Even then transitioning to doing stuff like, you know, like Miss Marvel coming up. Well, we've done Captain Marvel, so that makes sense. And She-Hulk, well, yeah, Hulk's like one of the main Avengers, so doing She-Hulk and introducing
Yeah.
her, absolutely. And it's like Moon Knight. Like, one of these things is not like the others. You
Just
know what
throw
I
it
mean?
out there just for me.
You
They
know what I
knew.
mean? It's like does not fit with anything else, but it works.
Hmm.
You know, it worked. Like Moon Knight is the epitome of why I love comic books. Like because do the insane stuff, do the crazy stuff, tell a story that's out there that's different from anything else. Tell something phenomenal out there. You know, just give me a reason to love it. Like I'm open to loving any comic story. Just give me a reason to fall in love with it, and I probably will.
Absolutely.
You know, and Moon Knight, the show does that. You know, it's like if you watch the show, I guarantee you're going to want to know more about this guy, and it'll make you want to pick up a Moon Knight comic and see what the hell else happens, you know?
Definitely.
Oh, gee, it's like I wear white so they see me coming.
That is the coldest line of any comic book ever. It is so, like, okay, if you guys don't know, the line in the comic books is people constantly make comments about Moon Knight's wearing white. They're like, aren't you, that's not going to help you hide. And he goes, no, that's the part I like, is what he always says. He says, I wear white so they see me coming. And I think he says their hands shake so much that they couldn't hit the moon anyway. And it is so, like, stone cold, the delivery of it. It's fantastic. And the other line is, I died once and it was boring, so I stood up.
That's awesome.
He's got some good one-liners, yeah.
I mean, that's it. One-liners like that. What else do you want? Like, that's perfect.
Yeah. He's a little quippy, too. He can get quippy like Spider-Man in the comics. Not as much, but there's a line in the newest Devil's Reign where it's the same comic I referenced earlier, where he says, you're never going to see your family again because the guy is abusive to his child. And the guy... The villain says, like, as soon as I get out of prison, I'm gonna go right back to her, and he says, no, I told you you'll never see her again, and then he gouges out his eyeballs, and I'm like, holy cow! It's
no, it's being literal with that one. Like, wow.
Yeah. He's like, no, I'm serious. You will not see her again.
So I know you've mentioned a few, like, during this, and we're kind of talking about it now and then. So for anyone, like, in our chat or that's listening that's, like, just seen the show, that wants to know more about Moon Knight, what runs would you recommend? If they enjoyed what they saw on the show, what would be the best Moon Knight runs for them to go and check out in the comics?
I would say it's hard to go wrong, but there are hit or misses. I would say start with either Lemire or Smallwood, or if you're really, really pressed for stuff and you want to catch something new, read Jed McKay's, but understand that one's ongoing, and it brings up stuff that you have to have a little bit of Moon Knight knowledge going into it. So Lemire or Smallwood are really like the good kicking off points for modern comics. You can go back to Avengers Initiative and Vengeance of the Moon Knight, but the early 2000s comics were very gritty and maybe not everybody's cup of tea. So Smallwood and Lemire are the two big ones, I would say.
Nice. So there you go. Some comic book recommendations for you as well there. But that's pretty much it for us for today. That's pretty much everything on Moon Knight. I want to say a massive shout out to Jarrett. Thank you so much for coming on and talking Moon Knight with us and geeking out a little bit with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. And the Sea of Thieves stream too. Like, I'm gonna try to get back on more of those.
Yeah, man.
It probably won't be till summer comes, but I've been having a blast, man. It's always a good time connecting with you, Cross.
Yeah, man, just hit me up, man. We stream every Friday night pretty much with Sea of Thieves, so whenever you're free, just hit me up, man. We'll get you in on the crew. It was a lot of fun when we got you in for that week, man. And that's... I
can't be on the same week as Chunk, though, because, obvious reasons.
Yeah, PTSD from...
Yeah. I go to sleep every night, and I'm like, not the bomb!
Yes, he blew me up last Friday there. Again.
I saw it. That's wild.
Speaking of Chunk for there, thank you for that little segue so I can throw it up on screen.
Yeah.
Make sure to check out our brand new merch that was designed by Nitro that's up on screen right now. One of them, #Brigged, is our Chunk the Hutt inspired.
Fantastic. Gosh, yeah. It's wild how talented he is.
Nitro? Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah. It always throws me off because I've been looking at his custom sneakers on...
yeah.
On Instagram, and man, he's just oozing with talent.
Yeah,
both of you guys are. You guys are phenomenal.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. And for anyone as well, by the way, if you're not part of our Discord, hit up our Discord. And the Art of the Hero channel on there. Nitro, who was working on like 2 of the turtles for the TMNT piece that he's given away.
Yep.
Just off the cuff on Friday, decided to finish off the other 2 turtles, and I was like, okay, they're looking cool. Then the background was done and it was all put on, and he's got these like 4 shadowed like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on this like cityscape with rain coming down. Like, dude, it's not even fair how easily you just did that. It's like, it's not even close to fair.
I can draw maybe a stick figure. That's about where my talent lies.
I was gonna say that. It's like I literally for every bit of art for our channel, I'm like, Nitro, you have to do this. Like I've got no artistic talent in me at all. Like I cannot do this. You have to do the art for the channel. Like I'm not capable of it. I would take some of it, but I just can't.
That is phenomenal. Wow. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, you see it? Yeah. Yeah, like literally, if you're not in our Discord, let me put the link in chat there now. But go hit it up, join our Discord, Art of the Hero stream. Go check it out. It's the man is scary talented, and he's also, which you might want to check out as well, Jarrett. He's actually got a Moon Knight piece coming up. We're doing our 12-hour giveaway. Chunk, I believe it was, won the TMNT piece, but I think it was Mark from the Good Morning Guys won a Moon Knight piece. So awesome. I think that's the next one he's working on, and then he's got another couple of commissions that special requests that we gave away. Like if you want to hit this guy up for like some sort of artwork, hit up Nitro, man. The guy's
the guy.
He's insanely talented. He's so good. He's such a good artist, and he doesn't realize just how good he is. But massive thank you, Jarrett, for you coming on. Thank you for those compliments as well. Massive compliments to you guys. Infinity Bros are a phenomenal group of guys, phenomenally talented group of guys who are podcasting, who are streaming on Twitch, who are hitting it up on social media with keeping up to date and all that stuff with their tweets and their TikToks and all this young people stuff that I can't keep up with because I'm an old man.
That's really high praise, but you got to remember Zane is on the show, so don't give us too much credit.
I know, it's like Zane. Well, Zane's on the show sometimes. Right,
Zane's occasionally on the show.
And it's alright, you can mute when Max is speaking as well.
Right, yeah. You don't need Max, it's fine. You can skip that part.
He only runs the whole like podcast side of things, it's fine. But no, love Max, just love giving him a hard time. Awesome dude. But absolutely love the Infinity Bros. I mean, we've been friends with you guys for like what feels like forever at this point.
Absolutely. If
you guys are not checking out the Infinity Bros or not listening to their podcast, one of the best podcasts that's out there that isn't ours, they are not checking out their Twitch stream, are not checking them out wherever they're doing stuff on their website where they're posting blogs and stuff as well. It's like LJ in chat, funnily enough, was sharing that he's just posted a blog on there recently. I even wrote a blog on there at one point.
Yep.
Okay.
Our guest writers are currently holding it down for the Daily Snap.
Alright, let me get the spelling of this right. I'm doing a shout out on Twitch for you guys, and I have to make sure I get the right spelling of Infinity Bros because on every single freaking social media it's a different thing. There
really
we go.
We need to consolidate.
So just pick one and stick with it. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, there we go. Clip for that. I think that's actually one from. If not from this Friday, then from like one of the previous ones where you guys played Friday the 13th.
That was Friday the 13th, and poor Isaac was like, they all have COVID right now, and all the people who had COVID were playing, so they're all hacking up lungs on stream. But
what was that scene like? They posted us. Was it a short recently there? Like, was it yesterday or something, or earlier today of like Max getting the crap scared out of him?
He's for anyone who doesn't know, and I'll let you finish up in a second. But Max is terrified of everything, literally his own shadow. And in the middle of Friday the 13th, his wife like jump scares him, and it is phenomenal. It is so good.
That is amazing. I love it. I didn't get to watch the whole clip yet. I saw a bit of it. Like, I'll let you check it out later. I thought he got scared in game. I didn't realise his wife had jump scared him. That's phenomenal. I love it.
So good.
But yeah, please go and check these guys out. I would share the link for Infinity. I'll do it anyway. You guys can like work out how to get to their stuff.
Yeah, just creative copy and pasting.
Copy and paste. Just take out the social media thing that's attached itself on. But these guys are on everything. Please go and check them out. We love the Infinity Bros so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Jarrett. This has been an absolute blast today. I've had a lot of fun just chatting with you, and we'll definitely do this at some other point. And we can try and get you on. We'll work it out, the logistics of it, obviously with time differences and everything. And it's been a little hard, but we'll definitely get you back on at some point.
Yeah, and the summers are really nice too, and I'm 2 weeks out from being done teaching, so yeah, should be pretty easy.
Nice. We'll work out something. We'll definitely need to do something to get you back on.
For sure.
But that's pretty much it from us here today. Remember to join us throughout this week. We will be back on here on Twitch throughout the week. Tomorrow night, my lovely wife Jay will be back with a little bit more of Nancy Drew. She started a new Nancy Drew game last week, and we'll be continuing that. I will be back on Tuesday night doing some Batman Arkham Knight. We're pretty much finished. I did a lot of the side quests and stuff off stream this week, so we literally just have some of the Riddler stuff to do and the main story to finish off, which we're almost completed. So we're going to try and get that done this week, if not in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, and move on to some of the DLC for the game. Nitro will be back Thursday night. He will be doing some more of his art on stream. If the TMT piece is completely finished, he should be starting a new one of his commissions. And then, of course, Friday night, we will be back with some more Sea of Thieves. Next Sunday, the podcast will be back. I will be joined by another special guest because Nitro is still on vacation. How dare he abandon me for 2 weeks? Shock, horror, unheard of. But we will be getting joined by, I don't know if he's still around, he was in chat earlier, by Mr. Locksteady. And him and I are going to have a nice little rant because we are going to be talking about one of our favourite TV shows, Gravity Falls, Disney XD show phenomenal. That not a lot of people talk about, not enough people talk about, and it is freaking amazing. So I'm excited to talk about this. Freaking Bill Cipher, one of the best villains of anything. Don't at me, you know I'm right. You all will know I'm right if you know the show. And then finally, the following Sunday will be when we get into our Multiverse of Madness, because Nitro's back, and I decided I would at least wait on him for the Multiverse of Madness one, since he's missing out on Moon Knight. So make sure to check out each of those nights, and we will be back tomorrow. But everyone, take care, have an amazing day. Jay will see you all tomorrow night, and remember, it is a good week to be a geek. Take care, everyone. Love you all.
Cierra miedo.